Hi, I'm Jim Baker with Michigan Tech University. We work closely with the MTech Smart Zone on commercialization of university technologies, and these are my 3 takeaways on being successful as an entrepreneur in a rural environment. My first takeaway is leverage the power of ecosystem. In rural settings, resource constraints are severe, and to be successful, it requires a full team of community partners, business partners, and others to be successful. So be aggressive in networking and seek out partnerships whenever possible. My second takeaway is be deliberate about customer engagement. Travel when you need to. If you're in a rural setting, most of your customers may not be near you. Be ready and prepared to get on the road, go meet them, understand their needs so that you can best satisfy them. And my third takeaway is embrace the setting, don't apologize for it, and don't think that you can't be successful because you're in a rural setting. Entrepreneurs do it every day. That's what they do. They fight through resource constraints, they fight through environmental constraints, and they achieve success. You can do that anywhere, whether it's a metropolitan setting, a rural setting, or anything else.
Don't give up. You know what I mean? Don't be shy. Bring your product in. Let us sample it. Let's talk through where you're at in your process and what we need to do to get you there, whether it's trying to find you a commercial kitchen, packaging, UPCs, you name it. We have a lot of resources that we utilize.
Expand your network of people, work with different agencies, consultants, people like the MEDC have been an integral part in just expanding our knowledge base, connect with people, and create those partnerships and relationships and be open to change.
Work with your local food industry helpers. PMBC is amazing. MSU Product Center has been great. Michigan is so supportive of its local food industry. And if you take advantage of those entities that are out there to help you, like Pure Michigan Business, it's amazing what they'll do for you. You just have to be active and, make your voice heard and seek out the opportunities, but they will give them to you for sure.
Hi, my name is Javier Evelyn, and I'm the founder and CEO of Allergy. We build products to improve the overall quality of life of those impacted by food allergies. And today I want to talk about my 3 takeaways from matchmaking. My first takeaway is, don't pull out your pitch deck. This isn't the time for that. You want to keep it quick and simple. This is a time to build a quick relationship, that first impression, to ensure that you can get that next meeting. So the goal should only be next meeting, not tell a life story. My second takeaway is, as the great Russell Wilson says, I know in Lionstown, but the separation is really in the preparation. So prep as best as possible. Ensure that you have a good sense of what you want to get out of that conversation. And don't be shy to what I say, shoot your shot. Make sure you close the deal towards getting that next meeting. That should be your ultimate goal. And my last takeaway is, if you run this race, you can't win it in one leg. You got to have 2 feet in the game. So you can practice in matchmaking sessions like this. The Med Health Summit is a great tool to plug into the med device and biosciences ecosystem of Michigan and beyond. Detroit's a hot city right now, so you'll be wise to take advantage of the social capital that the city has at this point.
My name is Marcus Wright. I'm from Daddy's Dough Cookies, and my 3 takeaways if you want to start a business are, my first takeaway is you need to have a plan. So write down a plan, whether it's just anything on a scratch sheet of paper. Just, I plan to, bake cookies. I plan to sell sunglasses. I plan to sell lipstick. Whatever it is, make sure you write down a plan. Just start with something on paper. It's easier to build from something than to build from nothing. My second takeaway is to get a business coach. Now, this is not really, really hard. Some people think how do I find a business coach? Well, there are often people who are in your industry. There are plenty of organizations in your area. Some of them are nonprofit organizations that offer free coaching. Some of it are coaches that you actually have to pay for, but it's usually worth your money. I pay for a business coach and I meet with my coach probably every other month. My third takeaway is to not be afraid. I think the biggest thing is that people are often afraid, thinking about, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do this. but think about what would happen if it actually worked. So that was my thing when I started my business. Is this gonna actually work? And I wouldn't know if I didn't try. So I was like, let me try it. I'd rather try than fail than just wonder for the rest of my life, what would have happened if I tried this? So those are my 3 takeaways.
Hi, I'm Patty from Invest Detroit Ventures. I'm here today to talk about the 3 key takeaways from investor matchmaking meetings. So the first thing, when you sit down with an investor, it's really important to make sure that you give an overview of your company. Whether it's investor or partner, we've been given things in advance, but we're meeting with lots of teams. So please just make sure we have a grounding in who you are. My second takeaway is making sure that you really take time to learn who you're going to be meeting with. Even if it's a quick look at LinkedIn or making sure you're looking at the company website, taking time to understand who you're meeting with really goes a long way into setting the tone for the meeting. And my last takeaway is make sure that you're really transparent about where you're at in your process and at what stage other investors are. So if you've only had a first meeting with an investor, try not to position it as, hey, they're getting ready to invest. Trying to create a false sense of urgency is another challenge we often see. So if the deal's gonna happen probably in the next couple months, let us know that. If it really is closing next week, that's probably too late for us. But again, don't exaggerate your timelines to fit your needs. Make sure that you're really being honest about where you're at in the process.
I'd like people to know about Michigan Rise Pre-Seed Fund number 3 is we launched in August of 2020. We've made 8 investments to date. We are a collaboration between the Michigan Economic Development Corporation and the MSU Foundation. We exist to help entrepreneurs with that early gap funding that is so critical on their path to commercialization. What's even more important to know is we just do not fund companies. We're here to help them. We're here to coach them. We're here to connect with this network in Michigan that is here through the MEDC to provide support. When we're looking to make investments, we're looking at high growth, high tech companies here in Michigan. Second, we're looking for markets of good size. We're looking for companies that can grow to get venture funding. And then finally, we look at the business economics around the company. Those are all the important elements of a successful startup that we look at. There's so many positive things you can do to get the attention of investors. We have a great support network here in Michigan. First of all, go out there and learn as much as you can. We have 21 great smart zones across the state of Michigan that are there to help you. So first, get involved with those groups. Other things that are good for early startups are pitch competitions and accelerators. Those are great places to go watch other companies on their path to commercialization. Once you get all that together and you've learned as much as you can, go do your homework on investors that you want to talk to. Try to connect with those that connect with your company. One is Genomenon. Then when you look at the company, the technology behind it is a platform called the Mastermind. It goes out there and curates and mines data from all these publications to help give information about things like rare diseases. Another company I mentioned that we've invested in is Adea. Adea is led by Raphael Matone. Raphael is a prior leader in the company called Duo Securities, a unicorn here in Michigan. And finally, probably a third company I would mention is led by Jeff Sakamoto. The company called is Sakuru. It's a materials company with applications for solid state batteries. I'm excited about where the state is right now. There's so much momentum, there's so much talent, and there's so much success going on. When you look at this state, we're now on the map. We're starting to get attention here in the Midwest and in Michigan. If you go years back, that wasn't happening. As investors, the size of the market is very important for us in our fund because, we want to invest in those companies that are going to go on to get venture capital. So the bigger the market, the bigger opportunity. So international markets are important. I think networking is critical. Anything in life, whether you're doing a business or any path you have forward, relationships and outreach play a big component of that. For a successful startup, you want to get to meet as many as mentors and advisors and consultants as you can get. So the more you get to see the entire ecosystem, get involved with it, it puts you in the best position for success with your commercial venture.
Venture Catalyst is a 501c3. We're what's called an ecosystem development group. And so we focus on large-scale entrepreneurial ecosystem endeavors. That could be an event, that could be a connection, and that could be molding a company from anywhere from ideation stage all the way to growth stage and getting them investors and biz dev partnerships. We are headquartered here in Detroit, and the broad majority of our work is in Detroit and focused on companies in southeastern Michigan, but we also have work throughout the US and even some overseas. We have venture funds that we work with directly. Some of them might sponsor an accelerator. The targets are really going to be high growth, high scale. Our goal is to optimize the people who get into the program and optimize what they do next when they come out of the program. In the midst of this pandemic and in the midst of all the things that are happening, I think there's a concern about relationships, and the world of venture and investment is really, really focused on building relationships. Right now, people are doing a ton of virtual events, but now you have to apply to it a different way. Maybe you come prepared knowing who's going to speak at the event with questions that not only pertain to what they're talking about in the midst of the event, but also say that you've spent some time researching their work. It's a lot more work, and you have to be prepared because it's not going to be, you can't rely on personality and getting in their face. You're going to have to be a company that can show that not only can it thrive right now during the pandemic, but show that it knows how to adapt during the pandemic. What we have here is we have kind of like that perfect recipe for how people can build a business. So we have a massive, massive amount of people who are tech adjacent and have that skill set. We're one of the largest populations of tech and engineering talent outside of Silicon Valley. So that's part one. Part two is we talk about just that need and that ability to thrive when you don't have all the pieces. Early on when we were starting some of this stuff, we'd be invited to national calls. The question would be like, why is Detroit on this call of like these hot, thriving entrepreneurial systems? But now people are waiting for us to get on the call because they've seen what we can do. When you're here in Detroit, you have other folks who definitively want you to win, and they're actively doing moves to help you win. Whether that's tips, that's resources, that's putting in a good word, that's making connections, whatever those things are. They're not only working on their own business, they're working on making a way for their neighbor's business and those that are coming behind them. That is a really, really key part to being an effective ecosystem. Yes. It's actually something that we've focused on high tech, high scale versus small business, brick and mortar. With the high tech, high scale, we are looking for companies that have that ability to scale beyond borders. And that border, it could be just outside of, they don't need a direct salesperson in order to get their next customer, but it's also looking at, do they have something that is easily adaptable to other markets and other customers, other biz dev partners? So I wouldn't say necessarily that it's a part of the decision-making process, but it's definitely something that rounds out like strategy, that's something that rounds out how we meet people, how we vet people, and then being at one of those events and the ability to kind of get a feel for how they pitch, how they present themselves. Those are super key as we are doing other things down the line that are more due diligence focused on figuring out if they're a fit or not for a program or some sort of investment opportunity. Fun fact about me, I adopted my nieces. I've had custody of them since they were little, and right now they are home doing virtual school, and we'll be watching this hopefully online soon.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the Small Business Summit. As we all know, Michigan is home to thousands of small businesses, and they are the backbone of our economy, providing hundreds of thousands of jobs across the state and adding incredible vibrancy to our communities. They comprise over 98% of Michigan businesses and employ a staggering half of the state's workers. They are driven by talented and innovative entrepreneurs who have been incredibly resilient throughout this pandemic. Here at Leo, we appreciate your continued partnership as we collectively address challenges and provide support during these unprecedented times. We look forward to hearing directly from you today about the challenges you are facing and how the state can best utilize existing and new resources to provide critical support. And we are eager to continue our collaboration with all of our stakeholders to make Michigan more competitive and set us up for continued economic success in the years to come. I'm honored to be a part of this incredible team that works so hard every day to help our businesses grow and our state thrive. With that, I'm excited to introduce you to our governor, Gretchen Whitmer, whose bold leadership and vision has laid the groundwork to rebuild Michigan's economy back stronger than ever.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Small Business Summit. I appreciate you taking the time to join us for this virtual event, and I want to thank the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, and the volunteer members of the event steering committee for helping make today possible. I know we're all eager to get back in person, but I know also that we've saved you a trip today, and hopefully this will be a great source of information, and I look forward to when we can get back together in person. So we've made great strides, but we're pleased with how this summit came together today. It's an example of how government that is truly of, by, and for the people should approach the unique funding opportunities before us now. Because we have a generational opportunity right in front of us. We've got this chance to create significant, lasting impacts on Michigan families, on businesses, communities, and we know that we will only be truly successful if we work together as partners with all of you here today. We're committed to getting input and feedback on the policies and programs to support small businesses that we're considering early on, because by collaborating and coordinating with all of you and the wealth of experience, perspective, and expertise that you bring, we can make the most of this incredible opportunity for everyone in Michigan. And that's why our conversations and brainstormings will not end today. Beginning next month, we'll be holding similar conversations like this in communities across the state: Detroit, Flint, Grand Rapids, Traverse City, and we will be calling on many of you to participate in these ongoing conversations. And thanks to the success of our vaccine rollout with almost 62% of our population officially being vaccinated, we're looking forward to having those conversations in person again, so we can get back to traveling to communities across Michigan. There could be no better combination than taking the best of pure Michigan summer weather while we support our state's small businesses. Through these ongoing conversations, we're going to develop a comprehensive investment strategy that makes available funding go as far as possible and support the largest pool of small businesses by increasing access to capital. And this includes, of course, an emphasis on long-term economic growth by helping small businesses stabilize and grow following the impacts of the pandemic. Throughout the pandemic, we saw Michiganders all over the state step up and come together to stop the spread of COVID and to save lives. And now our task is to unleash the potential of our people, to drive innovation and investment, and to create tens of thousands of jobs and economic prosperity for all. Throughout COVID, our 23 economic relief programs for businesses supported more than 25,000 companies and helped us retain more than 200,000 jobs. There's still a gap that exists between pandemic relief and recovery funding at both the federal and state level for key segments of the business community. As we continue setting a course for economic recovery, we need additional efforts to stabilize, recover, and ultimately grow our economy here in Michigan to build on the foundation of support and relief we've already administered statewide. And with the large boost in state revenues announced last month at the Consensus Revenue Estimating Conference, we are in a strong position to make large investments that can transform the state and help residents and businesses recover from the pandemic. With more than $2 billion remaining in the CARES Act funding, nearly $20 billion in funding from the American Rescue Plan, and nearly $176 million in federal SSBCI funds coming our way, we've got a large influx of additional state revenue. This, right now, is the moment in Michigan history where we can deliver real and lasting positive outcomes for our state. It's an unprecedented amount of money, and it creates an unmatched opportunity for investment in people, in infrastructure, and the future leadership of our state. And through conversations like today's, we can help answer the multi-billion-dollar question facing us now as we determine how to put these federal dollars to use in support of all small businesses in Michigan in the years ahead. There are two major policy issues that we've already identified as having the strongest impact on small businesses in Michigan. The first would be to provide more targeted and intentional support for micro enterprises. We know we need to bolster our local businesses by prioritizing assistance for those who've been historically underinvested in by the private sector. COVID made very clear that stark economic disparities that existed among small businesses, especially minority and women-owned businesses, have been particularly hard hit by the outbreak. As we work to build our economy back better than before, it's crucial that we can make sure those businesses that they may have, the businesses that may have been left behind before, that they're coming along with us every step of the way with the resources and support they need to be successful. We discovered over the past year, for example, that too much of the support provided missed a significant segment of small businesses in Michigan that have less than 10 employees. Yet during the pandemic, these were some of the businesses hardest hit, and they're a critical piece of the small business puzzle that we need to support if we're going to achieve comprehensive, meaningful, and generational success. Micro enterprises or small businesses with less than 10 employees, they're significant contributors to our communities by providing accessible job opportunities for community members, building wealth among family members, and creating upward social and economic mobility for women and minority-owned businesses is so important. And these businesses also help create more vibrant communities throughout the state that support a higher quality of life that defines our way of living here in Michigan. We're also interested in learning from you about how we can invest more in small businesses to better support entrepreneurial opportunities in Michigan. During the pandemic, we've been proud to watch our innovative entrepreneurs and startups come together in the face of COVID to provide increased testing, to support frontline workers, and help monitor the impact of social distancing on keeping us all safe. The innovation and ingenuity on display by our small businesses and entrepreneurs over the last year will be vital in helping us forge a strong future. And it's critical that we accelerate business growth by creating opportunities to turn ideas into investment. That means making sure that our environment for future technologies becomes even more robust over the coming years. We're already proud to rank among the top 10 in the nation for STEM degree completions. Now we need to make sure we're taking intentional, proactive steps to keep the high-tech professionals graduating from our nationally recognized state institutions. We want to keep them here in Michigan. Today, the best venture capital funds and emerging tech companies have more options than ever in terms of where they will invest and locate and grow. And that means in Michigan, we must invest in a solution that combines capital, R&D incentives, and high-value services to sustain an ecosystem that can attract and retain emerging tech companies and talent across all sectors. The only way we can address these policies, however, and inspire real, equitable, and generational opportunities across Michigan is by leveraging the federal funding that Michigan is set to receive through the Biden administration's American Rescue Plan and its renewal of the State Small Business Credit Initiative. After the challenges and setbacks small businesses and the workforce have faced during the pandemic this past year, we cannot afford to let any amount of this enormous influx of federal dollars be left on the table. We can address these gaps in our economy, create equitable opportunities, and be the crafters of our generation's Great New Deal. But it's going to take all of us working together to get it done as one Michigan. By working together, we can stay laser focused on growing the economy and getting Michiganders back to work and building a future that works better for us all. I can't wait to hear the innovative ideas that come out of today's event. And I encourage you to be thinking big, asking the hard questions, so we can make sure we get this right. It's an honor to continue serving as your governor of this incredible state that we all call home. I look forward to working with you throughout the summer as we finalize these funding plans and programs together. Let's get it done.
Thank you, Governor. I'd now like to introduce our first panel, where experts will review key data on COVID-19's impact on Michigan's small businesses and what the state's economic outlook could mean for small businesses. I'm joined today by Gabe Ehrlich, the director of the University of Michigan's Research Center on Quantitative Economics. Prior to joining RSQE, he worked in the Financial Analyst Division of the Congressional Budget Office. Gabe co-authors RSQE's economic outlooks for the US, Michigan, and Detroit, and he is a regular presenter at the state's consensus revenue estimating conferences. David Ponraj is the CEO of Startup Space, a technology platform for entrepreneurship-led economic development. David is a serial entrepreneur with a background in community building, innovation, and market research. Startup Space works closely with business support organizations across Michigan to provide inclusive and equitable access to entrepreneurship for all communities. Brian Calley is the president of the Small Business Association of Michigan. Brian was, of course, also Michigan's 63rd Lieutenant Governor, serving in that role from 2011 to 2018. Prior to that, he served 2 terms in Michigan's House of Representatives, and he worked for over a decade in community banking. I want to thank our great panelists for being here today. First up is Gabe, who will be providing an update on the current economic outlook.
Well, thanks very much. My name is Gabe Ehrlich, and I'm the director of the Research Seminar in Quantitative Economics, which is the economic forecasting unit at the University of Michigan. And it's really an honor to be here today to talk about where Michigan's economy is right now, where we expect it to go over the next few years, and what it means for small businesses. I will start my presentation with some of the high-frequency data we've been following during the pandemic. Ever since the pandemic began, I've been starting off this portion of my presentations with an update on new cases of COVID-19. And this is actually the first presentation I'm giving without that chart, and I couldn't be happier to have deleted it from my slide deck, and I definitely hope it stays in the trash. So starting with actual economics, this slide displays time spent at restaurants and stores and at workplace locations from Google's cell phone GPS data. Both of these series are for the state of Michigan, and you can see that both measures fell by almost 60% statewide in late March and early April last year. Time spent at stores and restaurants bounced back sharply last summer before trailing off again amid the state's second wave of COVID-19. We've seen a very good recovery this spring, though, and time spent at stores and restaurants climbed back to its pre-pandemic level in early June. Time spent at workplaces has been a lot slower to pick back up, and it's currently running about 20% lower than before the pandemic. We think it's an open question whether time spent at workplaces will ever recover completely. Some surveys show that 20% of work will continue to be done remotely even after the pandemic. And if that's the case, where we are today may represent the new normal. This slide shows the proportion of small business closures relative to January 2020. As of early June, about 39% of all small businesses nationally were closed, and 44% of Michigan's small businesses were closed. A business is counted as closed if it did not process any card payments during the past 3 days. And that means, in principle, some of these businesses could reopen. You can see that pattern in the graph in the second quarter of last year as we emerged from the first wave of COVID-19. Realistically, though, many of these businesses have likely closed their doors for good. On the other side of the business life cycle, though, this slide shows new business applications. The Census Bureau calculates these numbers from applications for new employer identification numbers. New business applications fell in the second quarter of 2020, but then they surged during the second half of the year, and they've been running strong so far this year as well. Over history, business applications generally predict actual new employer startups over the following 2 years, so there is a delay between business applications and people actually being hired. Still, this is a very encouraging pattern, and it's a welcome contrast from the period following the Great Recession, when business applications were depressed for some time. This slide shows job postings from Indeed.com relative to February 1st of last year. And you can see that job openings fell by about 40% in the second quarter last year before starting a strong rebound. Nationally, job openings are running nearly 30% higher than they were before the pandemic. And here in Michigan, that number is even stronger, a bit below 40% stronger. The trend in the Detroit area is roughly in line with the state, and it's even stronger in the Grand Rapids area, where job openings are more than 40% higher than they were before the pandemic. So it's not just your imagination. There really are a lot of job openings out there to be filled. I do want to say, if you're struggling to hire right now, we do expect it to get a little easier to fill jobs over the next few months. And so with that, I want to shift gears and talk about what we expect for the US and Michigan economies over the next few years. This slide shows our forecast for US real GDP, and we're in the midst of a strong recovery right now. We saw 6.4% annualized growth in the first quarter, and we expect growth to top 7% in each of the second and third quarters. Looking at the year overall, we forecast real GDP to grow by 6.2% from 2020 to 2021, after falling by 3.5% in 2020. We forecast annual real GDP growth to come in at 4.2% in 2022 and 2.7% in 2023. And so as you can see in the chart, we're forecasting a V-shaped recovery in real GDP. Turning to the automotive sector, national light vehicle sales fell from 17 million units in 2019 to 14.4 million units in 2020. Demand has been extremely strong so far in 2021, but supply has been tight. The microchip shortage has reportedly cost automakers more than 1 million units of lost production. We expect vehicle demand to remain high, but sales will remain constrained by low levels of inventory. The good news is that the chip shortage should begin to improve soon. Balancing supply and demand, we project that sales will reach 17.2 million units this year. They then surpassed their prior all-time highs with 17.5 million unit sales in 2022 and 17.6 million sales in 2023. Detroit 3 sales fell from 7 million units in 2019 to 5.9 million units in 2020, and we expect them to come in at 6.7 million units this year. In 2022 and 2023, we forecast Detroit 3 light vehicle sales to climb to about 7 million units per year, roughly in line with the 2019 pace. Turning now to unemployment, Michigan's unemployment rate jumped from under 4% before the pandemic to nearly 20% in the second quarter of 2020. It fell all the way to 5.3% in the first quarter of this year, and it came in at 5% in May. We expect Michigan's unemployment rate to hold roughly steady over the rest of this year, as a rebound in labor force participation offsets the job gains we expect. Unemployment then declines over the next 2 years to under 4% by the end of our forecast. I mentioned earlier that it should get easier to fill jobs over the next few months, but we expect Michigan to be facing labor shortages again before too long. We are an older state with a slow-growing population, and that will put a long-term speed limit on the state's job growth if those trends don't change. This slide shows Michigan's payroll jobs count. Michigan lost nearly 1 in 5 of its payroll jobs in the second quarter last year. We recovered a bit over half of those losses in the third quarter. But job growth then slowed down to 36,000 jobs in the fourth quarter last year and 30,000 jobs in the first quarter of this year. As you can see in the chart, we expect job growth to pick back up going forward, and we're forecasting an average of about 49,000 job gains per quarter over the next year. We see growth slowing down from there as we get closer to a full recovery, and we expect job growth to average about 25,000 jobs per quarter in the second through fourth quarters of next year and 17,000 jobs per quarter in 2023. And as you can see in the chart, our forecast would take Michigan's payroll job count back to its pre-pandemic level at the end of 2023. And this ought to be my final graph for the day, and it shows our forecasts of national and local consumer price inflation. Headline national inflation came in at just about 5% year over year in May. There are a number of particular factors that are contributing to the spike in inflation right now, including the rebound in energy prices and a jump in used car and truck prices. Rapid growth, fiscal stimulus, and supply chain bottlenecks are driving labor and other input costs higher, adding to inflationary pressure in the short term. Over time, though, we believe that production will catch up to meet the additional demand, dampening the inflationary impulse. We forecast headline US CPI inflation to average over 3% this year, before cooling down to the mid 2% range in 2022 and 2023. Looking at local inflation, we expect inflation of 2.8% this year, and then about 2.6% in each of the next 2 years. The local inflation rate we're forecasting for this year would be the highest since 2011. For context, though, local inflation averaged 2.8% per year from 1990 through 2008. The period following the Great Recession has been a period of very low inflation. We expect inflation to pick back up over the next few years, but historically speaking, the inflation rates we are forecasting are not unusual. So that's it for my graphs. There are just a few key points I hope you'll take away from my remarks. First, the pandemic has taken a large toll on small businesses, but we are seeing promising signs of new business formation. Second, it should get easier to fill job openings over the rest of the year, but we do expect labor shortages to be a persistent feature of Michigan's economy in the longer term. Third, real GDP has essentially recovered at this point, but it will take employment longer. We expect Michigan to get back to its previous employment level at the end of 2023. And finally, the high inflation we're seeing right now will likely prove to be transitory, mostly transitory, although we do expect inflation to be higher over the next few years than in the recovery from the Great Recession. So with that, I'll wrap up. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Gabe. That was a very helpful level set for the rest of our discussions this morning. I would like to get some thoughts on the outlook from our panelists. I'm going to start with Brian. We know it's been an extremely difficult year for small businesses, but as we just heard from Gabe, the economic recovery seems to be underway. What have you heard from your members about how they're doing right now and how they are feeling about the future?
Well, thanks, Susan. I appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with the audience today. We just completed a survey of our members. We have 28,000 members, and since we're a horizontal trade organization, that means every industry and spread across the entire state of Michigan, in literally every county. And this survey turned back some pretty interesting results. First is, even though it is clear from the results that small businesses were hit hard, there's still a fair amount of optimism heading into the future. We saw 72% feeling either optimistic or very optimistic about the future of their business. But as we dig into the numbers, we can see that they've got a lot of work to do. We asked what the top concern was that they had, gave several options. Far and away, finding employees was the number one concern. 47% put that as their top concern. 50% of those that we surveyed expected to increase the size of their workforce over the course of the next 6 months. 52% had increased their wages since the pandemic began. We also saw, though, that most businesses reported their 2020 sales were down compared to their 2019 sales, and about 34% said down more than 25%. So a very large decrease in sales, and yet still pushing up wages to be competitive. So there are a lot of results. We're going to send them out to everybody that's participating today, so you can see all the details behind it, and maybe take a look at some of the industries as well. But there is one thing is very clear, is that there's pent up demand. Entrepreneurs are still doing what entrepreneurs do, which is get out there and take risks. There are two caveats every time that we do a survey. Two caveats to keep in mind. Startup businesses usually don't join statewide associations. So when we survey our members, it's usually more mature businesses that we're talking to. And also the ones that answer surveys are the ones that made it this far. So To Gabe's point earlier that some businesses have closed and closed permanently. They're not represented in this survey, of course. These are the ones that have made it this far. One final point is that those that have been pessimistic about the future, it came in at 14% in this survey. So of these more mature businesses, about 14% were either pessimistic or very pessimistic about the long-term survival of their business. That's been pretty consistent throughout this pandemic. And the last 3 surveys that we did, that about 1 in 7 were feeling very pessimistic about the future. So while we see the number of them that are optimistic increasing, that means that those that were kind of neutral before are becoming more optimistic. But that same segment, and really it kind of makes sense when you think about there are some industries that just the nature of what they do have been more impacted, and their recovery is only just beginning now as the final restrictions and capacity issues are lifted off them. So I'm not particularly surprised by that, but I thought noteworthy that whether we are in the height of a COVID infection wave or now in very low numbers and coming out of the pandemic, that group that are pessimistic about the long-term future has stayed fairly consistent throughout the entire pandemic.
Okay, thank you. We have David with us as well. We know he's been talking to small businesses, and maybe some of those that are, that you said are not represented in your survey, micro businesses. David, what are you hearing? Are businesses going to be able to survive until the economy really starts rolling?
Yeah, thank you, Susan, for having me, and I'm honored to be part of this panel. We recently concluded a survey of 750 small businesses in Southeast Michigan, and this was funded by the Wilson Foundation and the Kresge Foundation in partnership with the New Economy Initiative. We also looked at other data sets across small and micro businesses, and we found that small and micro businesses were disproportionately affected by the pandemic. And before I jump in to kind of provide more insights, let me just acknowledge that we also got data from the University of Michigan, Michigan Women Forward, West Michigan Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and Stud Garden in Grand Rapids, along with Adina Astor and Matt Brewster Consulting. And also want to say that when we talk about micro businesses, we're talking about Main Street businesses, landscaping businesses, hair and beauty salons, bakeries, fitness studios, midwifery, and even previously incarcerated business owners. And we're hearing two things from
we're having a little bit of difficulty with David's connection. Do you want to try again, David? Maybe we've got you back.
Yep.
Okay, yep.
Okay, perfect. So they need help. 80% of them need loans under $50,000, and they need it fast. And they need help with pivoting and retooling to adapt to this new post-COVID. Brian, there's a small percentage that not come back or set that we missed because they segments that they're going to recover and come back from this pandemic.
Okay, thank you, David. Brian, I wanted to talk to you about COVID assistance. What types of COVID assistance were your members able to access? What proved to be the most helpful? And then David, from you as well, were micro businesses able to access these programs? So Brian, do you want to go ahead and start?
It's one of the questions that we asked in the survey too. What types of assistance did you access throughout the pandemic? And far and away, the Paycheck Protection Program was the number one. It was about 91% of the respondents had taken advantage of at least one of the 2 rounds of Paycheck Protection Program. The economic injury disaster loans, EIDL loans, were number 2 on that list. About a third of the businesses had taken advantage of that. A lot of the other programs, not surprisingly, because the other programs were fairly limited in comparison to what the federal government could do, showed up lower on that list. We also found that for this segment, again, more mature businesses, that for their capital needs when they got traditional financing, that it generally was from a traditional bank or credit union, a lending institution. of that sort. So clearly, the Paycheck Protection Program was the tool of choice. It was the one that was most robust. It was the one that got the most attention, and that businesses were able to access directly through their current financial institution relationship, which I think proved to be, on the implementation phase, extremely important for how that was laid out. I think if they tried to do it directly as the Small Business Administration, by the way, that's not us. We're the Small Business Association of Michigan. The Small Business Administration is the U.S. federal government. If they had tried to do that without banks and credit unions, I think it would have been significantly harder for them to get the resources out. I think that public-private partnership proved to be a key factor in the deployment of those resources.
Yeah. And I'll just have to say, things have kind of significantly improved because we've looked at data and understood where the least impact has happened. But let me just kind of take a step back and say, early on in the pandemic, micro businesses did not have access to these programs at the same level. And some of the reasons where capital access programs were not targeted to micro businesses, they also lacked knowledge of how to navigate the regulations and the financial documentation that was needed. And also when it comes to procurement, they didn't know, how to go about getting access to these government programs. And even within the micro business community, underrepresented communities and minorities were disproportionately impacted. So for example, Hispanic, immigrant, and Black-owned businesses were 3 to 4 times more likely to not have these financial statements on hand. Only 48% of businesses with under 2 employees had financial statements available at all. And female-owned businesses also had lesser, to some extent, lesser access to these programs because they weren't prepared to apply to them. All this to say that as we look at the programs that are coming down the pike, we have to make sure that we combine them with technical assistance, because in a lot of cases, it's not just about the availability of the funds. We have to make sure that these micro businesses have the tools and are ready to be able to access these funds. Otherwise, we'll be in the same place that we were in the first round of PPP, where we found that Black business owners only had about 41% of application rate, and out of that, only 50% got approved. So about 20% of Black business owners in Detroit even got PPP in the first round. So these are all kinds of data points that tell us that we have to make sure that we combine all our capital access programs with the right type of technical assistance to make sure that it gets to the people we want to get it to.
Okay, I want to switch to another topic. Brian, we're hearing a lot about how difficult it is for small businesses to find employees right now, although Gabe has given us a little bit of reassurance that will improve. And I'd like to maybe circle back to him to see what he's hearing that gives us that hope. What is it that you're hearing from your members? What policies do you think might help small businesses on the employment front right now?
I think we have to recognize that this is a multifaceted issue. So I don't think we need to cover, because it's covered a lot, the unemployment system and the issues there. Employers really do feel that that's a problem. So let's just kind of accept that for a moment and take a look at a few of the other issues. Childcare is a major issue for a segment of the population. So if you look at workforce participation rates and the data that comes out of the Department of Labor, you see that older employees and employees with young children, especially women with young children, are those that have exited the workforce at the highest rates. And so we know that childcare and access to high quality, affordable childcare is important. It's one of the areas where I think even in a complicated political environment, that there does seem to be a lot of energy across the political spectrum to deal with this. And a few of the areas that I think are particularly important are the reimbursement rates that are paid to providers themselves. Those need to be increased, and the governor has proposed increasing those, I believe, by about 20%. Will make a very big difference. And also the eligibility criteria. So to move the eligibility criteria, I would argue as high as you can under the federal rules, which I think is about 200% of poverty, will make a really big difference as well. So you get a family of 4 up to $51,000 or $52,000 a year could qualify for this type of assistance, and it really puts the workforce back in reach for those employees that have younger children.
Thanks for touching on those issues. Those are, obviously issues that we are hearing quite a bit about. Gabe, is there any more information that you want to share that you're seeing that will give small businesses, hope that finding employees will become easier in the coming months?
Well, thanks, Susan. I don't have a lot to add to what Brian said. I think he covered it well. It's a multifaceted issue. Just the thing to say is, a lot of these issues should ease up as we head, later into the summer and into the fall. That's the short run. The thing I do want to add is in the longer term, listen, we're going to be dealing with this issue for a long time in Michigan. I mentioned this in my remarks. If you think back to 2019, we were already starting to see this issue pop up in Michigan. When you think about the middle of the decade, it's going to come back and even potentially before then. So this is an issue we've got to think about in Michigan. Yeah,
definitely something that we need to be talking about long term and not just fixing the problem, this summer.
Right.
So, David, as micro businesses look to start growing, as COVID is coming to an end, what type of supports and services would help them succeed? And then, Brian, the same question for you.
Yeah, so we looked at all of our data and we kind of looked at what we think are the minimum set of solutions that could help change the story. And this is what we think can help. First, government loans and capital access programs need to be exclusively designed for micro businesses because businesses under 10 employees have very unique needs. And when you say small business loans, kind of excludes the micro businesses. So we need loans that could be exclusively designed for micro businesses. We also need to incentivize CDFIs and other nonprofit lenders to provide these kinds of loans. Today, a lot of them look at loans about $250,000, and they're not incentivized to provide microloans. So we need to change that for them and give them the right incentives. We also need to fund programs that increase capacity, capability, and competency of these online lenders. In some cases, they want to, but they don't have the capacity, or in some cases, they have the capacity, but they don't have the training. So we got to get the right mix so that these these nonprofit lenders can actually support micro businesses. One area that I think we really can make significant impact is through using fintech and these other technology-based solutions. Crowdfunding and these other tools now exist that I think micro businesses can benefit from. And if we do it right, we can also prevent the predatory lending aspect of online lending. In a lot of cases, micro businesses want loans and they want them fast, and they also don't care about interest rate as much as they care about amount. So speed and amount, which then puts them in the hole because they now have really bad terms. So how do you create these fintech solutions, but also protect them from predatory lending? We also need to invest in trusted connectors on the ground. These are people that can actually help translate the programs, especially in immigrant communities. You want to make sure that there are people that can help them with language barrier, digital access barrier, etc. I think that is going to be significant. And then we also want to make sure that we define, I think the governor talked about less than 10 employees as micro businesses. Better definitions in this space will kind of help create better programming. There are other recommendations, but I think if we did even a subset of this, it would really help.
David, thanks for hitting on all of those issues. I wanted us to, talk about micro businesses and getting loans. So thanks for sharing that information. So, Brian, that same question, what types of supports and services would help?
Yeah, this is one of the questions, again, real time, that we just asked members. In what ways would you want assistance, or what are the key areas that you'd like to see the public policymakers zero in on? Assistance finding employees was number one. Again, not a surprise, particularly for this set of businesses that a high proportion of expects to hire more employees over the next 6 months. But it's also assistance training employees. So we're seeing a lot of employers that are willing to change the standards on how a person comes in the front door. In other words, that the qualification criteria is no longer degrees and certain experience. It's a matter of are you going to show up for work on time and put in a hard day's work, and are you willing to learn? So training programs are, I think, are going to be a more important. They've always been important. I think they're going to become more important in the future. By the way, shout out to Futures for Frontliners, Reconnect, and Going Pro, 3 highly successful and very relevant scaled solutions for helping people to upskill and become more qualified for the types of employments that are out there. We also saw the technical services show up at a higher rate than what we had seen in the past. About 26% said help with technical services. And this is not surprising because, as the world has changed so quickly, and the way you do business, the way you interact with your employees, the way you interact with your customers has changed so dramatically, so quickly through the pandemic in ways that probably won't just change back. The idea of gaining mastery in this new way of business has showed up at a level that we hadn't seen before. Again, with this type of business, the type of business that would join a statewide association tends to be more mature and been around for a number of years. That was maybe a little bit of a surprise to see it show up in that way. And then information technology at 16% as well. I think that one probably would have been higher if you would have asked maybe a year ago, and businesses have just had to figure this out. There are a few other things that is hard to really boil down to a question for a survey, but just anecdotally as we interact with members, the idea of managing a workforce more remotely, I think there are a lot of questions that are going to come out of that, and how you hold a culture together. How do you continue to develop and foster a strong culture when people aren't together as much as they were before? And then, and the other area I'll say that I think is probably going to take a heavier lift in terms of a public policy response to the changes are the highly dense areas in terms of population in commercial districts and downtown areas where the physical location of the workers has changed in such a permanent way. We know from the state of Michigan, for example, in the city of Lansing, because it's a public body, it's making public decisions and people can see that. But we have to assume that there are a lot of organizations that have tens of thousands of office employees that are making the same decisions, but somewhat privately. And we don't necessarily know exactly how many of those employees are coming back, but those commercial districts are going to change in such fundamental ways. And you think of the progress that places like Grand Rapids has made in the last 30 years, places like Detroit have made in the last 15 years, especially. And to take a step back from that because of this exodus, essentially, of customers, right? The people that have moved from one place to another place in such a substantial, permanent, and immediate way, I think is going to require a public policy response to ensure that those areas don't get hollowed out again.
Right. Brian, I'm glad that you touched on the issue of remote work. I was going to ask you that question. I was going to ask you what you were hearing from your members about, how they were going to be bringing their employees back, and then also what you were hearing from local small business owners who are impacted by people working remotely. So thanks for touching on that. So to get to a slightly different topic, Gabe, I want to ask you, we're hearing a lot about supply chain disruptions, from microchips for cars to the ingredients Starbucks uses for their breakfast sandwiches. How much longer will we be dealing with these disruptions?
Well, I think I've got good news on cars and not great news on breakfast sandwiches, which is, I think that, the microchip shortage should begin to improve in the third quarter is what we're hearing. Call it Labor Day, give or take, we expect to see some improvement. We've already heard some encouraging news on that front. But the reality is, listen, supply chains are going to be stretched for a while. We really had moved to a just-in-time, a very lean supply chain, very international, and the pandemic has obviously disrupted that. It's not the type of thing that you change overnight. So we wouldn't be shocked to see some of these issues popping up for the next year or even two.
Okay, so we are getting close to the end of our session, and I want to give each of you a chance to leave us with a closing thought about the outlook for small businesses going forward. So, David, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, thank you again for having me. We're looking at all of what we've learned over the past 18 months. We learned that a lot of our programs early on did not make the impact, but we've been able to learn from it, and what we are doing today and what we'll be doing over the next 12 months are significantly going to help micro and small businesses get back on their feet. There's also work around technical assistance. We've talked a lot about capital, but technical assistance and wraparound services, which are bringing these businesses online, helping them with pivoting their business models, etc. They're all starting to happen. And if there was one thought that I had, which is when we asked them about their sentiment, with all of this impact and everything looking so bleak, is there any hope? Are we going to see this massive shutdown of micro businesses? And over 80% of all businesses said they're coming back, and they're coming back stronger, and they're going to hire. And so we know that if we do everything right, the businesses are ready, and they're going to come back stronger. So that gives us a lot of hope and optimism, and gives us the energy to get this right.
We have to say kudos to all of those, micro business owners, small business owners who are maintaining that positive outlook. Brian, your final thoughts here for this session.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. And thanks again for the invitation to be here and to participate in this. Also for the close and strong working relationship with the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, in particular, MIOSHA and MEDC, who have been very close partners throughout this whole pandemic. One bright spot that I wanted to hit on is that the entrepreneurial spirit is alive and well, and you can see it showing up in the census data and the new business starts, including new businesses that are planning on having employees. So not sometimes they're like property holding companies and that sort of thing, or no employees, but it really, it's off the charts over the last 15 months. And so that what that tells me is that we have a great opportunity right now to build and foster an entrepreneurial economy, which, as we know, is such an important foundational aspect of the supply chain and of our communities, and the way that communities provide opportunity to the people that live in them. So I think the time is now, as we look at these issues and workforce challenges and technical issues, and how do we help people to come along. Not only are people in business optimistic about their future, there are so many new people getting into business, that it creates really the chance for exponential growth as we exit this pandemic.
And I have to say thank you for the strong working relationship that Leo has had with your association. We have been able to do some unique things through that partnership to help your members and other small businesses across the state. So Gabe, as we wrap up here for our last couple of minutes, is there more information you want to share in terms of the outlook for small businesses going forward?
Well, just to conclude, Susan, I wanted to say thanks a lot for having me. Both to Leo and to MEDC. It's an honor to be here. If you are a small business owner and you've kept your business going over the past 15 months, I want to say congratulations. I know it's been hard, and I admire you. And if you're a new business owner and you're starting out, I'm really excited to see what you do here in the state of Michigan.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And I just have to say, on a personal note, while I've had my career in state government, my sister has been a small business owner. And so I've seen, what she's done in the past 25 years and what she has, gone through in this pandemic and trying to hire employees now. So just, high praise to all of the small business owners out there, and, for the bright outlook and the positive information that David and Brian have shared from their members. It is exciting to think, as we come out of this pandemic, the positive and incredible things that we're going to be seeing from small businesses across the state. So as we wrap up this session, now it is time for us to go into our first set of breakout sessions, where we will hear from the small business industry and support providers who will discuss the opportunities and challenges facing them for the rest of 2021 and 2022, and what needs exist for new or expanded services. Panels will focus on the specific needs of both micro and second stage businesses. Our micro enterprise session will be facilitated by Pam Lewis, Executive Director at New Economy Initiative. In the second stage session, our facilitator is Brian Calley, President at the Small Business Administration of Michigan. Please join us in the breakout sessions by clicking on the breakout session tab located on the left-hand side of your event page. There, you will be able to navigate between all of our breakout sessions today. So enjoy whichever of the two sessions you choose.
Hi, I'm Patty from Invest Detroit Ventures. I'm here today to talk about the 3 key takeaways from investor matchmaking meetings. So the first thing, when you sit down with an investor, it's really important to make sure that you give an overview of your company. Whether it's investor or partner, we've been given things in advance, but we're meeting with lots of teams. So please just make sure we have a grounding in who you are. My second takeaway is making sure that you really take time to learn who you're going to be meeting with. Even if it's a quick look at LinkedIn or making sure you're looking at the company website, taking time to understand who you're meeting with really goes a long way into setting the tone for the meeting. And my last takeaway is make sure that you're really transparent about where you're at in your process and at what stage other investors are. So if you've only had a first meeting with an investor, try not to position it as, hey, they're getting ready to invest. Trying to create a false sense of urgency is another challenge we often see. So if the deal's going to happen probably in the next couple of months, let us know that. If it really is closing next week, that's probably too late for us. But again, don't exaggerate your timelines to fit your needs. Make sure that you're really being honest about where you're at in the process.
I'd like people to know about Michigan Rise Pre-Seed Fund number 3 is we launched in August of 2020. We've made 8 investments to date. We are a collaboration between the Michigan Economic Development Corporation and the MSU Foundation. We exist to help entrepreneurs with that early gap funding that is so critical on their path to commercialization. What's even more important to know is we just do not fund companies. We're here to help them. We're here to coach them. We're here to connect with this network in Michigan that is here through the MEDC to provide support. When we're looking to make investments, we're looking at high growth, high tech companies here in Michigan. Second, we're looking for markets of good size. We're looking for companies that can grow to get venture funding. And then finally, we look at the business economics around the company. Those are all the important elements of a successful startup that we look at. There's so many positive things you can do to get the attention of investors. We have a great support network here in Michigan. First of all, go out there and learn as much as you can. We have 21 great smart zones across the state of Michigan that are there to help you. So first, get involved with those groups. Other things that are good for early startups are pitch competitions and accelerators. Those are great places to go watch other companies on their path to commercialization. Once you get all that together and you've learned as much as you can, go do your homework on investors that you want to talk to. Try to connect with those that connect with your company. One is Genomenon. And then when you look at the company, the technology behind it is a platform called the Mastermind. It goes out there and curates and mines data from all these publications to help give information about things like rare diseases. Another company I'd mentioned that we've invested in is Adea. Adea is led by Raphael Matone. Raphael is a prior leader in the company called Duo Securities, a unicorn here in Michigan. And finally, probably a third company I would mention is led by Jeff Sakamoto. The company called is Sakuru. It's a materials company with applications for solid state batteries. I'm excited about where the state is right now. There's so much momentum, there's so much talent, and there's so much success going on. When you look at this state, we're now on the map. We're starting to get attention here in the Midwest and in Michigan. If you go years back, that wasn't happening. As investors, the size of the market is very important for us in our fund because, we want to invest in those companies that are going to go on to get venture capital. So the bigger the market, the bigger opportunity. So international markets are important. I think networking is critical. Anything in life, whether you're doing a business or any path you have forward, relationships and outreach play a big component of that. For a successful startup, you want to get to meet as many as mentors and advisors and consultants as you can get. So the more you get to see the entire ecosystem, get involved with it, it puts you in the best position for success with your commercial venture.
Venture Catalyst is a 501c3. We're what's called an ecosystem development group. And so we focus on large-scale entrepreneurial ecosystem endeavors. That could be an event, that could be a connection, and that could be molding a company from anywhere from ideation stage all the way to growth stage and getting them investors and biz dev partnerships. We are headquartered here in Detroit, and the broad majority of our work is in Detroit and focused in companies in southeastern Michigan, but we also have work throughout the US and even some overseas. We have venture funds that we work with directly. Some of them might sponsor an accelerator. The targets are really going to be high growth, high scale. Our goal is to optimize the people who get into the program and optimize what they do next when they come out of the program. In the midst of this pandemic and in the midst of all the things that are happening, I think there's a concern about relationships, and the world of venture and investment is really, really focused on building relationships. Right now, people are doing a ton of virtual events, but now you have to apply to it a different way. Maybe you come prepared knowing who's going to speak at the event with questions that not only pertain to what they're talking about in the midst of the event, but also say that you've spent some time researching their work. It's a lot more work, and you have to be prepared because it's not going to be, you can't rely on personality and getting in their face. You're going to have to be a company that can show that not only can it thrive right now during the pandemic, but show that it knows how to adapt during the pandemic. What we have here is we have kind of like that perfect recipe for how people can build a business. So we have a massive, massive amount of people who are tech adjacent and have that skill set. We're one of the largest populations of tech and engineering talent outside of Silicon Valley. So that's part one. Part two is we talk about just that need and that ability to thrive when you don't have all the pieces. Early on when we were starting some of this stuff, we'd be invited to national calls. The question would be like, why is Detroit on this call of like these hot, thriving entrepreneurial systems? But now people are waiting for us to get on the call because they've seen what we can do. When you're here in Detroit, you have other folks who definitively want you to win, and they're actively doing moves to help you win. Whether that's tips, that's resources, that's putting in a good word, that's making connections, whatever those things are. They're not only working on their own business, they're working on making a way for their neighbor's business and those that are coming behind them. That is a really, really key part to being an effective ecosystem. Yes. It's actually something that we've focused on high tech, high scale versus small business, brick and mortar. With the high tech, high scale, we are looking for companies that have that ability to scale beyond borders. And that border, it could be just outside of, they don't need a direct salesperson in order to get their next customer, but it's also looking at, do they have something that is easily adaptable to other markets and other customers, other biz dev partners? So I wouldn't say necessarily that it's a part of the decision-making process, but it's definitely something that rounds out like strategy, that's something that rounds out how we meet people, how we vet people, and then being at one of those events and the ability to kind of get a feel for how they pitch, how they present themselves. Those are super key as we are doing other things down the line that are more due diligence focused on figuring out if they're a fit or not for a program or some sort of investment opportunity. Fun fact about me, I adopted my nieces. I've had custody of them since they were little, and right now they are home doing virtual school, and we'll be watching this hopefully online soon.
You know your business better than anyone. And the Michigan Economic Development Corporation has more ways to help your business in Michigan than everyone. Getting to know us can help you build stronger connections, expand into bigger markets, and gain access to new investors. Big, small, global, or local, the MEDC can help your Michigan business like nobody's business.
My name is Kim Gomez, and I'm the founder and CEO of Mi Padrino. Mi Padrino is an online mobile application that makes the planning and paying for Hispanic celebrations easy and effective. I've done my pitch hundreds of times, and I get asked again and again, how have you come up with your pitch? Like, how does it work? How are you able to win competitions? And I really owe it to pitching to my kids. I know you might think that sounds crazy, but if you can pitch to your idea to a middle schooler and have them, one, pay attention, and two, get it, you can pitch to just about anyone. My kids see me late nights, working to make my dream a reality, and they know that I'm not necessarily sacrificing being a mom to make that happen. I know, for example, when I did my pitch, when I was practicing my pitch to my middle schooler, I went out that night and went to Accelerate Michigan. They knew how nervous I was. They saw me pacing at home in the kitchen, practicing my pitch and having them ask me the tough questions. That night when I won $100,000 at Accelerate Michigan, I FaceTimed my family, and they were so proud of me. And I was proud of me too, because it's just, you do have to sacrifice a lot on both ends, and to just see that everybody that it all comes together, my kids are happy and we were able to succeed as a business, you just can't change that or replace that with anything. I know it might sound cliche, but my mom is my number one idol. My mom was an entrepreneur. She instilled in me what it meant to be an entrepreneur. And hopefully I'm instilling those same values in my children. Being an entrepreneur isn't an easy road. And so if you can be an entrepreneur, I feel like you can do just about anything with your life.
Earlier this week, I was able to participate in a conversation with two very special guests who weren't able to join us live. Up next is a recording of that conversation.
Next, we'll be hearing from U.S. Senator Gary Peters and White House Senior Advisor Gene Sperling with an update from our nation's capital. Senator Peters has represented the state of Michigan in the U.S. Senate since 2015, and prior to that served in the U.S. House, in the state Senate, and in local and state government. No matter where he has served, he's always had a reputation for effectiveness. Last year, Senator Peters was rated the most effective senator by the Center for Effective Lawmaking. His legislative record includes helping to pass the Small Business Jobs Act in 2010 and authoring the legislation that created the state Small Business Credit Initiative. Born and raised in Ann Arbor, Gene Sperling is currently serving as the White House American Rescue Plan Coordinator and as a senior advisor to President Biden. Mr. Sperling also has a long history of public service, having twice served as the director of the National Economic Council under both President Clinton and President Obama. During his time in the Obama administration, Mr. Sperling played a critical role in the auto rescue plan and worked closely with Senator Peters and others in Congress to help pass the Small Business Jobs Act. Thank you both for being with us today. Senator Peters and Mr. Sperling, you both worked together to create the state Small Business Credit Initiative Program, SSBCI, during the Great Recession. Did you have any idea when you were working on this program a dozen years ago it would prove to be so successful?
Well, I'd say we hoped it was going to be very successful, and we were very pleased that that was the result. It was great working with Gene in a very tough time for our state. I just had come into Congress at that point with the financial meltdown that we saw, and the really one of the absolute largest issues we were grappling with was access to capital to be able to bring liquidity into the marketplace. So it was a decade ago, but still very vivid in my mind. I'm sure Gene remembers every little detail about it as well. And we had a time when banks weren't even lending to other banks. So if banks aren't lending to other banks, they're certainly not lending to anybody else. And with the auto industry the way it was, and Gene's great help dealing with the auto industry. If I just bring back a story that this is something I'll never forget. As a new member of Congress coming in, as the economy was melting down, the auto industry was in a tough spot. And I went to Chrysler headquarters. The congressional district that I represented included Chrysler headquarters in Auburn Hills. And I went there at the invitation of the CEO, Mr. Nardelli, who was the CEO of Chrysler at the time, and a lot of his senior executives. And we were up on the top floor. All of you remember that, or have that amazing building, that large headquarters there. And when I was sitting there, he said, Congressman, he goes, I want you to be very clear. We are in serious trouble. We are heading to a point where we need to reorganize, but we can't get debtor in possession financing. Basically, money is not available. So he says, I'm just a few weeks away from liquidating Chrysler, not reorganizing. I'm just a few weeks from liquidating this place. And I looked around the room, and other folks, I don't know if they had heard their CEO actually say that they were going to liquidate the company, the look on their face. And I had this immediate image sitting here at this headquarters, and folks who are watching this are familiar with the massive complex and the parking lot. I just thought, here we're going to have an empty parking lot. There's going to be grass growing in the parking lot. Jobs are going to be shuttered all across Michigan. This is absolutely catastrophic, and we've got to work. And thanks to Gene and the Obama administration, we were able to get that funding, and Chrysler was included with GM. But I tell that story because that was the desperate shape we were in with a major company. You can imagine with all the small businesses that I was hearing from is that they needed to have the capital to survive and to get their businesses up and running. And that's why this plan came together and worked with a lot of great folks to think about how do we give the MEDC more flexibility to provide loans, particularly to small manufacturers it was the supply chain that we were really worried about. That as that supply chain fell apart, we all know in Michigan, without a supply chain, you don't have OEMs. You got to have that pipeline of materials and parts coming in. And that's why it was created. And the results, as you mentioned, were great. I think over $600 million in private capital, 12,000 jobs. I'm certainly pleased by that. But I'll tell you, that's why it was great to see Gene here, because we worked on this and he was such a leader in that area. And now he's back again for another very challenging time in our economy with a really key position with the Biden administration. So Gene, it's great to see you on so many fronts.
Well, it's great to be here. And as you all know, I'm a Michigan boy, born and raised in Ann Arbor. Brother still lives in the Ann Arbor, Detroit area. My parents lived there their whole lives. So for me, Michigan was the heart of the economic distress with the auto industry, but it was also the heart of my heart. And I'd never really tried to hide that much. On small businesses, what was unfortunate was that initial TARP legislation that was passed before we came in, and we found it didn't allow us to do everything we needed to do for small business. We tried, so we had to put forward separate legislation. So we put forward a small business lending fund, and we put forward the state small business credit initiative. And I will say that a lot of the intellectual leadership for that came from Michigan. It was just what then Congressman Peters was saying, and other Michigan officials they had a collateral program that worked for manufacturers. Well, Virginia and others were pushing a capital access program. So if I had any smart idea, it was simply to say, hey guys, let's take these great ideas and put them together. And but when we went up to propose it, everybody was focused on this $30 billion lending fund. And when at the time, Congressman Peters came in and said, no, I'm going to focus on the state small business credit initiative. And he became the lead sponsor in the House That just meant everything to us, because before then, people in the House didn't really understand until he really stepped up. And I will say that when we were going through the hearings in the House, I'm not sure either of us would have bet it would have passed, no less been a success. But it got over to the Senate and they had to do an up or down vote. And it ended up being pretty much what we all, with the congressman and us, constructed on the House side. They never could amend on the Senate. And the key, I think, was that at that time, it wasn't just that states were the banks were starved, states were starved. So if they had to do any matching at all, they couldn't do it. So we had to give funds into these programs so that they could do the lending. Now, thank God you got Joe Biden here now with this huge state and local program. But at the time, the state local program was much less. States were really starved. People forget how much that hurt, that led to the depth of the reception and a weaker recovery than we'd like. So when the state small business credit initiative went in, it was, what can you say? It was an emergency effort. So when then you find out over time that it is really working, not just on the things, the capital access program, the collateral program, Michigan ended up leading in both, but then the venture capital. This is a country where venture capital goes to like a few cities, and suddenly we've got a program that's getting venture capital. So for us to see this $1.5 billion come back and be $10 billion and now become a major force, because remember, this leverages 5, 6, 7, 10 to 1. 10 billion could be 100 billion. It could be even more. So I think for President Obama, I think for now President Biden, I think for Senator Peters and I, we were doing what we could in an emergency, but to see it become now the basis for this major small business effort is gratifying. But I know we feel the same pressure to make sure this one performs as well.
Well, that sets up perfectly for my next question. The economic challenges facing our country today are very different than those we were facing back in 2009. Why was the new SSBCI funding approved, and why do you expect this program will again be a powerful tool to help small businesses?
Well, clearly, although it's different in many respects, we still need to be in a position to help small businesses to get back up on their feet as we recover from this pandemic. And here we had a tool, as was mentioned, that was very successful. And when you have a successful tool, it's usually a good idea to use it again when you have a project. And that's what the purpose of this. We were able to get even more funding for it. And the reason for that and the strong support from the Biden administration and my colleagues here in Congress is that we had a proven track record of how this can work. The other aspect that was very important to me, and I know Gene will concur, is that we wanted to make sure particularly smaller businesses that were the hardest hit and oftentimes have the most difficult time actually getting resources that they need. And those are minority businesses, communities of color. And when you look at the impact of the pandemic, we already know in Michigan, from the disease perspective, we were disproportionately impacted in places like Detroit and other communities of color. And then that translated into those smaller businesses. When they get hit, it is a whole lot harder for them to recover. And often finding the resources that they need is also incredibly problematic. So we put some little different stipulations in this money. Is that of the 10 billion, 6 billion is under the rules that we had before, which we know work extremely well. But we also wanted to make sure there was roughly 3 billion of that would go to communities of color and small businesses, minority-owned businesses, because of the unique challenges that they face, and why helping them early is important, because if they disappear, it's a whole lot harder to build those businesses back up again. So that's why it was necessary. And I'd say, when we look at this piece, is that it's not just that, it's the rescue plan over. Gene mentioned the state and local piece, which is important, some municipalities. You've got to have strong local governments for small businesses to be successful in those communities as well. You have to have customers that are actually coming into your business and patronizing it, which is why the stimulus fund is so important. The child credit is incredibly important, because you got to have parents, who, especially if they have to afford things like childcare, They've got to have childcare in order to go in business. And our small businesses, as they look for employees, have to understand that those employees have a lot of challenges that they need help with to get to this new place. And they need customers with money in their pocket. So this is really a comprehensive plan, but this piece is one of those that we know works and why we wanted to make sure it was in this rescue plan.
Yeah, look, I think that one of the things that Joe Biden really appreciates, and I say this having worked with him when he was vice president and then worked with him on the Build Back Better proposal over the campaign and being here, is I think almost as much as anyone I've worked for, he really gets that, a recovery can look, you can have a recovery that might look good in overall numbers. You can say average house prices are back or average pensions. But if you're a feeling person, you know that it doesn't work for everybody. This kind of idea of a K recovery. It's just for people to say like, oh, retail sales or something is back, and not look at, is this recovery bringing everybody with them? And yeah, the recovery in it was a miracle that President Obama was able to pull us out of potentially new depression so quickly. But we also know that there wasn't enough support to really make it the robust recovery that you need. And you need a robust recovery to bring everyone along. We know that a lot of, we know like a lot of, very, very small Black businesses that related to the auto industry went out. That hurt those people who did nothing wrong other than be alive and breathing during the Great Recession, but it hurt the communities too. It defunded some of the people who are the leaders of those communities. And I think what, you saw with the push from Governor Whitmer, with, Senator Peters, all the people pushing in, and that President Biden felt was, we're not just trying to get out of the, it's the Build Back Better. We don't want to just get out of recession. We want a sustained recovery that brings everyone along. So yeah, guess what? Amazon and Google and Facebook are going to survive this, but there's no guarantee all these small businesses will. And even let me just say some of the other things that Senator Peters helped vote for in this American Rescue Plan: the restaurant program, the child care stabilization. In addition to this, what they all have in common is the economy might be getting a little better right now. You're running a restaurant or child care. You might be, or a small business may be getting a little better. It doesn't mean you're doing okay though. You might be 7 months behind on your rent. You might be 7 months behind on your supplies. You may need to get capital. You may be in a weakened position to get the capital without the Small Business State Credit Initiative. Your restaurant, and you think, wow, this is good. I got new business coming in, but my debtors are coming after me. So we're looking at the reality of what a real rescue and recovery means. And for the small, and again, we don't need to worry about the Amazons, but for the smallest businesses, there's a lot to worry on. And these efforts are going to be life and death for hundreds and hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of small businesses and childcare providers and nonprofits. And so, what's in here is absolutely will be critical, not just to your GDP growth, but to whether this is an equitable recovery.
So I just want to give you both one last opportunity. Mr. Sperling, if there's anything that you want to share in the work that you're doing with President Biden on the American Rescue Plan funding, and anything that small businesses can expect to see in the coming months. And for you, Senator Peters, are there any other things on your agenda in Congress that will help boost small businesses in the months ahead?
Well, I'll just add that that what I'm being charged to implement, and what legislators like Senator Peters wrote, what governors like Governor Whitmer pushed for, was very comprehensive. And I'd say to small businesses, make sure you understand everything in here. There is an employee retention tax credit that could give somebody up to $28,000 per employee that they are retaining or bringing back. And it's a huge incentive. If you're offering paid leave to your workers, you can get a significant incentive. There is, so and the state small business credit initiative, this is money that is going out now. It's not just for just escaping recovery. It's about expanding, creating jobs, building for the future. And I think if we can pass this infrastructure bill and everything, you're going to see the downstream effect. We all know what happens. The moment you know big things are happening, you know what happens. People start to line up contracts. One of the things we've discovered is even before a dollar of infrastructure goes out, it's already helping because people are keeping their workers online because they know they're going to get a contract. So we just want to say, we're here for the long run. You're going to hear a lot of critics saying, well, you're doing too much. Really? We're about having a 4-year strong recovery, and we'll err on the side of fighting for every last dime and help for the small businesses and the job creators of Michigan and in this country.
Yeah, Susan, let me just close with an effort that I'm involved with. We talked about a lot of the financing aspects of it, but this an area that was also of critical importance for small businesses is in the committee that I chair here in the U.S. Senate, which is Homeland Security and Government Affairs. And the area that we're spending a great deal of time focusing on right now is cybersecurity, to make sure that you can protect your business. We know that ransomware is what is happening there. We've been hit with some very large ransomware attacks that have gotten national news. I had the CEO of Colonial Pipeline in last week talking about that ransomware attack that put southeast part of our country in a serious situation in terms of fuel supplies. They paid a large ransom, and even though they paid, which we discourage, you shouldn't pay ransoms. That's only going to encourage more ransomware. Even though they did that, the key they got was not a fix. And according to the CEO, it's going to take months for them to recover from that attack. We had an attack on major meatpacking, and we're seeing small businesses are being particularly targeted. In fact, it's shown that a small business that is the victim of a cyber attack, it can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to recover. And a majority of small businesses tend to go out of business within a year if they're hit with a cyber attack. This is something we must focus on as a country. I know President Biden has been focused on putting pressure on foreign actors like the Russians that their wink and nod to allow these criminal organizations to exist will not be tolerated. I'm putting together a package of bills right now to deal with this issue in an aggressive way. We just passed through Senate in our Competitiveness Act legislation that will create a recovery fund as well to help small businesses recover. But of course, we don't want them to just recover. We want them to prevent it on the front end, not have to deal with it. And so how do we help and strengthen the ability for small businesses to have the resources, the knowledge and expertise to prevent this from happening for them? The one thing we know, even on the Colonial Pipeline attack, it was not a very sophisticated attack. It was a VPN network. It was an account that basically wasn't closed down. It was just a really basic hygiene. It wasn't closed down. They were able to get in and compromise a major company. Just think of the risk of all of our small businesses, and our small businesses, you tend to be linked to other larger businesses. This is a national security threat, and I'm focused on it to make sure we help our small businesses not only get the financial resources that they need, but to protect what they have.
Just one last thing. I do also want to say that, first of all, the fact that Michigan has Senator Peters, Senator Stabenow, powerful members, obviously a governor who was powerful enough to be on the very, very short list for vice president. This is a moment where Michigan has had a very, very positive influence on the legislation, the American Rescue Plan, where the voices are really heard. And, it's very exciting to me. And also speaking of successes, another $10 billion for community financial development institutions. And I think the thing that we know is we do have to get people through this rescue. but it doesn't mean that all these small businesses that have struggled with regular banks to get capital, that aren't taken as seriously, where the banks don't think they'll profit as much because they are too much processing fee for a smaller size, all of that doesn't necessarily go away. This combination of 20-some billion dollars, this is about not just rescue, it's about expansion, it's about having the financing for new technology, meeting the new needs of the future, creating the new jobs right here at home, and and as much as possible in my home state of Michigan. So thank you so much for having us.
Yes. Thank you so much for being with us today. Our state is very lucky to have you both serving us in our nation's capital.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you to Senator Peters and Mr. Sperling. Our next panel will discuss what's new and what to expect with the state Small Business Credit Initiative in the coming year. And I'd like to introduce our next moderator, Ned Stabler, CEO at TechTown Detroit.
Thank you, Susan, and good morning to everyone there. I'm Ned Stabler, the CEO of TechTown Detroit and the Vice President for Economic Development at Wayne State University. But I think I'm here today because 10 years ago, when we were developing the first SSBCI, I led the team at the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, who piloted the first model for it and then helped then Congressman Gary Peters and Gene Sperling really push it in DC to help get small businesses across the country, not just here in Michigan, the support they needed. We have a great panel for you here today, and I'm going to get to it right away. But we were also fortunate enough to have a special guest, Don Graves, the Deputy Secretary of Commerce, to join us. He has a very limited time with us today, so we're going to ask him to make a few remarks first, and then take some questions from the group before we hear from the rest of the panel of national experts on best practices for how to use this SSBCI money. So Deputy Secretary Graves also played a big role in the first SSBCI. He was instrumental in getting it passed and then actually overseeing it as part of the federal government. So without further ado, let me turn it over to the 19th Deputy Secretary of Commerce, Don Graves. Deputy Secretary, what's new this time around?
Well, hello, everyone. Ned, thank you. It's great to be here with you today and with so many friends. Thank you for the kind introduction. It's great to see you again, I should say, first off. I have very fond memories of my time in Detroit, visiting TechTown, talking with you, and also working with others on issues related to economic development, workforce development. Of course, working with MEDC in those early days on SSBCI. So let me say thank you for all that you do to help get Michigan residents prepared for jobs and making sure that we're creating an ecosystem that helps businesses to thrive. Well, as you mentioned, I've spent a lot of time in Michigan. I am not a Michigander. I am an Ohioan. Please don't hold it against me. Like I said, I've done a lot in Michigan. I think about pre-COVID times when I used to go to the Detroit Institute of Bagels for my morning coffee and bagel. Well, unfortunately, as a lot of folks know that live in Detroit, the DIB closed as a result of the pandemic, like a lot of other small businesses, which I think is what is really the factor that's different this time around for SSBCI than it was last time. It's why this discussion is so important, because we need to support small businesses in different ways than we had in the past. As many of you have heard me say before, every American has hopes and dreams. And as Deputy Secretary of Commerce, it's really part of my job to ensure that every American gets an opportunity to pursue their dreams and live lives of dignity. And that really starts with this ability to start and grow a small business, have access to credit and capital that will allow that business to grow and then to build that business and succeed. I'll just say that quickly before I get back to your question. A lot of people may not realize it, but the Department of Commerce actually has a number of component parts that are very much involved in the in building the ecosystem and supporting the small businesses across the country. Of course, we have the Economic Development Administration, which works with and invests in and alongside our partners in the state. But we also have the Minority Business Development Agency, or MBDA, which plays, I think, a fairly pivotal role in sort of promoting growth, in driving support for minority businesses. We have a number of national networks and business and specialty centers. So Michigan currently has 2 of those centers that help minority-owned firms build capacity and get access to credit and capital. One is the Detroit MBDA Business Center, which I'm sure many of the folks that are watching this have used or know about. That center has helped secure more than $550 million in capital and contracts. And then there's the Advanced Manufacturing Center, which has helped clients secure about $40 million as well. Those centers really are focused on helping manufacturing companies retool their operations and transition to healthcare supply chains and produce PPE and things like that. So that's what we're really talking about, is how we help businesses succeed through the pandemic, and then as we begin to transition out of the pandemic. That's what the MBDA centers are trying to do right now. It's what we're trying to do at Commerce. It's, as I said, creating the conditions for economic growth and opportunity to allow people to pursue their dreams and live lives of dignity. Now, Ned, I'll get back to your question. What's different this time? Obviously, the pandemic is different. The ways that our businesses have weathered the storm, or maybe not weathered the storm, is different. We also see our workforce system changing in very significant ways. Many folks have decided to leave their old jobs and look at new jobs, maybe try their hand at starting a business. We need to be prepared to meet those folks where they are, rather than forcing them to come to meet us. And I think that's what SSBCI does better than almost any other program that we've seen at the federal level. My good friends, Senator Peters and Gene Sperling, talked a bit about this. The SSBCI program was really a novel program when we started it back in the early days of the Obama administration, really building off of, Ned, what you and MEDC had done before that. The 2.0 version of SSBCI, I think, in addition to providing significantly greater amounts of capital, is giving us the flexibility to do everything that we did before, but it's built off of the learnings that we had from that first version. It's going to allow us to, for instance, in some communities, focus on early stage capital in ways that we hadn't thought about before. There were a number of venture firms that were started or that were using the SSBCI funding to drive businesses. But for many communities, they didn't have that vibrant, rich network of support, the ecosystem to support early stage firms. So you actually had this gap, and you had very few firms that were actually getting to the point to that high growth stage of development. So really having the early stage equity, it gives us more flexibility to target those businesses. The other thing that I think we at the federal level are recognizing is that, as I said, it's an ecosystem, that we have an opportunity here to look at all of the programs across the federal government, the state government, and local governments, as well as partnering with nonprofits, foundations, and the private sector to build that ecosystem. We've realized that SSBCI was good, and states use it very effectively, as you learned in Michigan. But if you're a small business owner, if you're trying to grow your business, you still have to go and find 3 or 5 or 10 other programs to support what you're doing. You don't always have the technical assistance that you need. You don't have the legal support. You don't have the financial support. You don't have the accounting support that you need. And so it's providing really surrounding those business owners with the support that they need so that they can succeed, grow their businesses, and then employ other folks. The other thing that the Department of Commerce does, I think, really well, that we don't talk about it enough, we certainly don't share with folks as much as we should, is our ability to help provide support on innovation, like our manufacturing institutes, one of which is in Detroit. Our ability to support business owners go through the intellectual property rights protection. So getting their patents and their trademarks and helping them deal with it globally. It's helping small business owners who have a great product and want to expand across the globe, but don't have the wherewithal to do it. The great thing with SSBCI 2.0 is that Treasury and Commerce are working hand in hand to make sure that, as I said, those business owners have all of the support that they need to succeed, so that they can think not just about what they're doing around getting access to credit and capital, but they can think about how they grow their businesses, they sustain their businesses, build partnerships around the globe, get help when they need it, when they're having issues. We're also thinking about workforce demands, as I said at the beginning. The workforce is completely changed from where it was a decade ago. And so part of the solution for SSBCI, I think, is that we're also thinking about how we ensure that that those small business owners have the workforce, their workforce needs met. So it's thinking about partnerships with the workforce the workforce investment boards. It's working with our community colleges and the Department of Education, the Departments of Labor. These are things that we're doing sort of behind the scenes here in Washington. But as the president said, it's all in the effort to build back better. We have to be able to build back with the resources, the support mechanisms, the capital, all at the right time in the right place to ensure that these businesses are successful. So I've maybe talked more than I should, and I know that you might have another question or two.
I do, but frankly, we'll take you for as long as your time allows. We know that you're the one with the busy calendar. I would just throw on there, as we're building back better, which I think is really obviously important to keep an eye on and a focus on. We need to make sure we're building back equitably as well, and that everyone gets to participate in the recovery, because that's how you make a recovery sustainable, is that we allow everybody to participate. So I'm really pleased to see a lot of the focus in SSBCI, as well as a lot of the Recovery Act programs that are clearly targeted towards making sure that we're removing barriers for everyone. I know time is of the essence, so let me ask you that question about timing. When does this money start getting out to the states? When do the states need to know how they're going to be spending it, so we can make sure it's getting into hands of the most needy businesses as quickly as possible?
Well, you're exactly right about timing. That is absolutely critical. That was what we were able to turn back in SSBCI 1.0. We were able to turn around those dollars pretty quickly. I think the program was the Small Business Act was signed in September, and we were able to get the first dollars out the door in the early part of 2011. We are on a similar timeline. Obviously we're at the beginning stage of the new administration, and there were some issues that we had to deal with around the transition from the previous administration to this administration. We're still building the teams. That said, the plan is that, as I understand it, that we will start seeking applications from states in the next few months, and that I certainly would expect that by the fall of this year, that you're going to start seeing some of those applications approved and the dollars start to flow, because we need to get the capital in the hands of the small business owners, the entrepreneurs who are really struggling. The funding from the CARES Act and the Rescue Plan is going to start running out by the end of the summer. So it's really important for us to make sure that those dollars are getting out to the small business owners. And I think, frankly, that these wide range of state programs are going to be the most effective approaches to do both to provide that flexibility to meet the specific needs of local communities, local business owners, and two, to also get at the first point that you just made about building back better equitably. We know that that minority-owned businesses, that women-owned businesses, businesses located in underserved communities often have tremendous challenges in access to credit and capital. And the great thing about SSBCI 1.0, and you heard this earlier, is that it overperformed as it related to those groups in those communities. So we think that with a much more focused approach, and I think you'll see this in the guidance and in the application process, with a more focused approach on supporting the least served businesses, to support the most distressed communities, we'll actually be able to have a meaningful, really appreciable impact on getting capital to those businesses, and as I've said, supporting them throughout their growth cycle. It can't just be that we put money out the door and then it just and then say, good luck, you're on your own. We have to be able to provide them that surrounding of support that Ned, you've worked on for so long in your career.
Absolutely. You know, you're 100% right. And I love the fact that you are partnering at the local level with local CDFIs and business support organizations and doing things like the Community Navigator program to make sure that the folks on the ground who know these communities. So for example, at TechTown, 86% of our entrepreneurs we served last year were people of color. 57% of the businesses were women-owned businesses. You know, we work with our partners at Detroit Development Fund and Invest Detroit and Prosper Us to make sure that we're really reaching a representative group of Detroiters. So I love that you're working through these types of organizations across the country to get into the community. I know that you've got to go. Thank you so much for giving us your time this morning. We greatly appreciate it, and all of the work that you do in Washington to advocate on behalf of American small businesses, which are the lifeblood of our economy. So again, Deputy Secretary Graves, thank you so much for coming tonight.
Thanks so much, Ned. Have a great day and good luck to everybody. Stay safe.
Great, thank you. So we're going to turn it over to the rest of the superstar panel of national authorities and leading authorities on what people are seeing across the country. I'm going to stop talking now because time is short and let them introduce themselves and tell you who they are and why they're specifically here. So let's start with Rachel Riley. Why don't you go right ahead from Aces and Archers?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm Rachel Riley. I'm the founder of Aces and Archers, a consulting firm, and also representing here today the Council of Development Finance Agencies. I'm a senior advisor there. CDFA was key advocate in the reauthorization of SSBCI. We've been holding biweekly briefings, and we also have a SSBCI coalition of over 150 organizations.
Great. Jason Rittenberg from SSTI, one of my favorite organizations.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Ned. So SSTI is a national nonprofit. We work with state and local governments, higher education around the country, really focused on how to create a better future through science, technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship. And we work with groups around the country focused on that. And then personally, very happy to be here, both through SSTI as well as previously I worked with states on how to use SSBCI and other investment and loan tools going back to the beginning of the SSBCI program. So very happy to be here today.
Awesome. Thank you. Joseph Perillo from the Brookings Institution.
Hi, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. Joseph Perillo from the Brookings Metropolitan Policy Program, where I'm a fellow that leads our work on economic development, small business analysis, and talent development.
Excellent. So as you can see, we've got a great group of leading authorities on what folks around the state, around the states, around the country are doing to help their small businesses to grow and thrive and survive this tough time. So let's jump right in. You just heard the deputy secretary talking about what was new and different, you know, in terms of the economy from 10 years ago and why they thought this was such an important program. Let me ask you, what are folks around the country doing? What are, lessons learned from the first time or national best practices that we saw that are going to be really applicable that Michigan should be thinking about as it's figuring out how to spend its money? Let's start with Rachel.
Yeah, thanks so much. So as the Deputy Secretary Graves mentioned, this is a very different environment right now. Business needs are different, but also we're seeing in the private sector, there's a different environment as well. I most notably want to mention that the impact investing sector has grown since 2012 by over 275%. And so as we're talking about leveraging up private capital, which is a key requirement and policy goal, of SSBCI. I think that the impact investing sector is definitely one where states can start partnering with high net worth individuals, family offices, corporates, your local anchor institutions to help address the need for private financing for these businesses. I also, as the Deputy Secretary mentioned, community development financial institutions and minority development institutions or depository institutions are receiving a lot of capital from the federal government right now. Most notably, CDFIs headquartered in Michigan actually just received $35 million through the Rapid Response Program. And I know that there's another $9 billion through the Economic Investment Program for CDFIs and MDIs. And so I really think that now is a moment as we look towards all this capital coming through these minority depository institutions, CDFIs, and impact investors that are on the sidelines waiting to support recovery efforts, that we build those partnerships.
Great, thank you. Jason, you at SSTI have written an entire report, and I just dropped a link into the chat for it about how states should be spending their SSBCI. We have too many acronyms these days. SSBCI money. This time, I dropped in the link. It's 20 pages. I assume everyone is reading it right now, but won't have time to read all 20 pages during this panel. So, could you give us a quick highlights? What are the most important things states should be looking for right now?
Absolutely. So the amount of money that you have this time to access at the state level is quite a bit larger. It's more than 6 times larger than what was available under SSBCI 1.0. That said, states still need to balance the pressure between leveraging as many federal dollars as possible while also trying to use the money relatively quickly. Because as the Deputy Secretary mentioned, there is a timing pressure on the funds. And then also there's an economic emergency. So you want to get that money out to people where it'll help. And so to try to balance that as much as possible, what we really advise the states to try to look at is where are both those immediate needs where you can have a direct and clear and immediate impact, but then how can you also think about trying to invest an amount of money into those programs that can look at making those programs sustainable, because that's much more feasible with the amount of funds that the states are receiving this time than they were receiving first time. And so some of the highest priority areas that we see where this can be really effective is putting together new seed investing funds. That's something that the private markets are pulling away from a little bit. So having a new publicly supported seed investment fund to help your new tech-focused companies launch, and then hopefully it can become evergreen if some of those investments really pan out well. Looking at advanced manufacturing, there are a lot of conversions going on in the manufacturing sector. There are new skills that manufacturers need to help their workers have, new equipment that they need. So trying to get those investments in place, make it possible for manufacturers to make those investments. And then in both the debt and equity markets, you see entrepreneurs of color and female entrepreneurs really not getting access to capital in the way that they need. So how can we be putting together programs that are going to really marshal and leverage private capital to support those types of new businesses as well? And there are, a number of programs that states can use to do that, but those 3 areas are what we're really focused on as high priorities.
Great. Thank you, Joseph. I know that that last issue there. How do we make sure that folks that communities, borrowers that had trouble accessing, say, PPP or other support programs, are more able to access this program? I know that's a special focus for you guys. Can you give us some thoughts there? How do we do that?
Well, I thought what Rachel said was really on point in terms of operating through these unique tools in the lending system, right, which are CDFIs and MDIs. And there's a tremendous moment, I think, to build capacity within those systems, historically kind of under invested in. So, but a really, really important tool as we've learned during this crisis. So California has a pretty interesting model where the state has seeded a fund, but is partnering with 12 CDFIs statewide to deploy that capital. They did this earlier in the crisis, but it's a notable model in that states can lead, but they're really reliant on those lending institutions that know their communities and particularly minority communities best. So I think that's one takeaway. A second takeaway is that what we learned from the Paycheck Protection Program was that there was a last mile problem in terms of receiving capital. There was either a lack of awareness of that problem, of that program, a distrust of that program, a sense that, look, I've never gotten any sort of engagement from mainstream financial institutions. This can't be for me if I'm a Black or brown small business owner in an underserved community. And really what broke through that last mile problem was something akin to what you mentioned earlier, these community navigators that we're out there kind of getting the word out and then making it as easy as possible to connect into this. So I highlight that because there are simultaneous resources at the local and state level through the flexible funding from the Treasury that can work with affected small businesses, both on capital and technical assistance. So I think the strategy here has to be wrapping around SSBCI some of those local and state dollars that are flowing through this network of support organizations, right? So this is where I think the two are symbiotic.
So is that flexible money, is that a part of that headline, like the state's allocation, or is that a separate piece?
The flexible money that I'm referring to is what local governments and state governments got to deal with their fiscal challenges, but they can work not only to address health problems, but also displaced workers and displaced small businesses. And there's significant resources that are flowing through there that can be leveraged with SSBCI, in addition to technical assistance money that is within the headline SSBCI program. So thanks for clarifying that.
So if there is money in the SSBCI for technical assistance, which we all know is important, but you're saying something that's a little radical in Michigan, that local and county government should partner and collaborate with this and try to leverage these federal dollars that are coming through as well.
In terms of getting the word out, yes. Yeah. Or funding the nonprofits that have access to those communities, yes.
Great. As one of those nonprofits, I just wanted to make sure we were putting a highlight on that, so everybody listening at the policymakers heard that. Rachel, what do you think? How do we make sure that everyone is getting to participate this time? Is it more technology, less technology, more hands-on, less? What's the way to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it's going to have to be tech-based, and I'm thinking specifically around how do you do small dollar deployments. One of the priorities here is to serve micro businesses, to serve more rural communities. And I think you're going to need almost a tech platform or a way or a partner to be able to do the small dollar deployments, because it's just more difficult to do smaller volume investments or loans at a higher rate. And we do have much more capital, as was mentioned this time. So I think there's a tech solution here, but we also, through our briefing series at CDFA, we've had experts come on and talk about some of the innovative outreach and engagement strategies that they've been using. And it's really grassroots, like Joseph was mentioning. So it's, buying media spots on local radio, doing print ads, so some of it is both tech-based and execution, but then also grassroots and outreach. And one of the things I do want to mention, because serving minority-owned businesses and minority-led businesses is a real priority this time around. Not that it wasn't last time, but it's almost a mandate this time, is that one of the things that when you're thinking about how do you serve Black-owned businesses, 95% of Black-owned businesses are sole proprietorships. And so I think states really have to figure out how do you serve sole props in order to serve that population in general. It's just critically important.
No, great point. I mean, so many of them are home-based businesses, they're sole props. Their revenue numbers are, in Detroit, 85% of the small businesses have revenues under $50,000. So we're talking about really small numbers here, and they don't have those existing banking relationships because of that. So we saw that actually in the PPP, especially in the second round, that the online lenders came in because they were able. So there's this little paradox of, on the one hand, we've got a digital divide where people don't necessarily have as much access, or their small business doesn't have a online presence and e-commerce and other hand. But on the other hand, because they don't have a relationship with a brick and mortar bank, they're more reachable by some of these other methods. So I think you're right. It's got to be an all or nothing approach. An all hands on approach, not nothing, all. We got to try it all. Jason, I want to pivot just a little bit. We talked about leverage and people partnering. Since you guys are have a national viewpoint, what do you think about that? Are there efforts, do you think, that will be regional? Will various states? I know, Deputy Secretary Graves is from Ohio, but he's done great stuff for Michigan. Should we be looking to partner with an Ohio or a Minnesota or Indiana on some of this stuff? Is that useful?
I think that it can be useful, but I think that, frankly, I'll be surprised to see too much of it. And the challenge is that the states are getting access to this funding to be able to use for, supporting businesses, growing jobs in their regions. And I understand that a lot of state officials are going to look at that and really want to make sure that the funds are being used to grow what's happening in their own activities the best. Where I think that you'll see the most fruitful partnerships that are also kind of realistic given political pressures are when you have a really effective, nonprofit partner or a model that's being used in one state. And you'll see a lot of states that are essentially using that same model, or maybe even using the same kind of partner essentially to execute a program within their state as well. That can be a really effective way to get national or regional banks to participate in the program. Smaller banks were a lot more active in SSBCI 1.0. Regional banks did a bit, and where regional banks got involved the most tended to be when actually, I believe, Ohio and Michigan and a couple of other states had very similar collateral support programs. And so when you have that same structure, it makes it easier for centralized underwriters to understand, what's going on with the program. Similarly, on an investment side, if you have national venture capital partners who are looking at a very similarly structured term sheet from one state to another, they might have an easier time making co-investments similarly in different states. And so I think there are, again, some benefits to looking at what others are doing. And we readily advocate to wholesale borrow or at least adapt more than trying to recreate the wheel every time when you're putting a new program in place. So I think you'll see a lot more of that than necessarily seeing multi-state programs.
I personally think on the banking side, it's a little harder, but certainly on the venture side, like it should be easier, if you will, to think about how to do that. And there's more of need and motivation. But you're right. I think unless there's a carrot at the federal level, I think it'll be hard to do that. Joseph, you guys seeing things differently or other thoughts?
No, I don't have a different perspective than what Jason put forward. I will just add one part to the venture conversation. One reason you have this tremendous concentration of venture capital investment in the United States is the money is concentrated in like 3 places, right? So it's very social network driven. And the really exciting opportunity here is, I think, to democratize access to venture capital, which has already started through a host of efforts, but I think this can accelerate those. There's a second layer, though, in terms of access. Just because of venture, there's more venture in Michigan or Ohio, doesn't mean that it's addressing, I think, the socially and economically disadvantaged part of this, right? So there's got to be a 2-pronged approach to access. Part of it is geographic. We need more money in the heartland. But then even within those cities, we have to think about who is distributing that money and acknowledge that about 1% of VC goes to Black founders. That may have a lot to do with who is controlling the money in their social networks and just the patterns of segregation in this country and how that intersects with all of this. So states may want to just think about, like, who are they partnering with? There's so many more diverse fund owners now that maybe this is a great opportunity to kind of provide them some capital and, change the makeup of that 1% number. Because if we do spend all this money and that 1% number changes, that's going to be kind of disheartening. So I would just add that as a focus.
Joseph, thank you for that. I wish Secretary Graves was here for that. We actually have a grant application with the Michigan Venture Capital Association and Ann Arbor Spark and Tech Town and the National Venture Capital Association and Venture Capital Institute to do exactly that, to try to source, create, train, get experience with more angel investors and venture capitalists of color, so that, because it is all about those trusted networks and how those dollars get turned out. We have about 2 minutes left. So Rachel, you got a lot. You're going to get the last thought of our panel, and then I'm going to go to Joseph and then Jason.
Yeah, one of the areas of partnership that I really encourage the state to think about and folks in Michigan to think about is how you're serving tribal governments. Tribal governments have a $500 million set aside through SSBCI this time around. And I know that there are a number of CDFIs headquartered in Michigan that are specifically serving tribal governments or serving on native land. And so I really think that this is a great moment for partnership between the state and local tribal governments to think about how you get dollars out and leverage dollars up in those communities. So that'll be my parting word.
That is a great parting thought. All right, Joseph.
All right, so my parting word is around process, which is so exciting. But I think the state should be commended for this event in that they are actively trying to solicit input from across a big and diverse state. And I would just encourage them to continue to do that. The feedback loops between local communities and state and the federal government have been critical during the crisis, and sometimes too disconnected. So while it is a lot of work and a lot of effort and adds some complexity, ultimately worth it. So I would continue down this path.
No, great point. And it's genuine, in talking with the folks behind this conference, asking like, what do you hope that, do you already have the ideas and you just want people to amplify it? No. They legitimately need support from the whole business community and the lending community to tell them, how they can best serve the needs on the ground. All right, Jason. No pressure. You're the last.
Sounds good. I mean, the top thing I would encourage the state to look at is really how to be as strategic as possible. If these funds are managed well, they can not only have immediate economic impact, but also stay within the state and create funds that can continue to support small businesses well into the future. So again, looking at identifying real economic needs that you have, whether that's seed investing, whether that's specific sectors that are high priority for the state, improving diversity, figuring out the areas that you need to invest in, and then putting together a structure for those programs that can help them reach an evergreen status that much money continues to benefit us for generations.
Great points, panel. Thank you so much. I hope the entire audience will join me in thanking you. We are at time, but we are looking forward to seeing how the state uses all this insight to equitably build back better as we move, hopefully, to the other side of this COVID pandemic. So thanks again, and enjoy the rest of the summit.
Thank you, Ned. Thank you to Mr. Graves and to our panelists for that great discussion. At this time, we'll be moving to our next set of breakout sessions. Access to capital for small business and how do we make it better, where you'll hear from experts in the lending industry to discuss lending products available for small businesses to help them grow during the economic recovery and the challenges they face in serving small businesses. In our banks, credit unions, and CDFIs panel, our facilitator is September Hargrove, VP at JP Morgan Chase, and our impact investing and venture capital breakout will be facilitated by Patty Glaze, EVP and Managing Director at ID Ventures. Please join us in the breakout sessions by clicking on the breakout session tab located on the left-hand side of your event page.
Hi, I'm Jim Baker with Michigan Tech University. We work closely with the MTech Smart Zone on commercialization of university technologies, and these are my 3 takeaways on being successful as an entrepreneur in a rural environment. My first takeaway is leverage the power of ecosystem. In rural settings, resource constraints are severe, and to be successful, it requires a full team of community partners, business partners, and others to be successful. So be aggressive in networking and seek out partnerships whenever possible. My second takeaway is be deliberate about customer engagement. Travel when you need to. If you're in a rural setting, most of your customers may not be near you. Be ready and prepared to get on the road, go meet them, understand their needs so that you can best satisfy them. And my third takeaway is embrace the setting, don't apologize for it, and don't think that you can't be successful because you're in a rural setting. Entrepreneurs do it every day. That's what they do. They fight through resource constraints, they fight through environmental constraints, and they achieve success. You can do that anywhere, whether it's a metropolitan setting, a rural setting, or anything else.
Don't give up. You know what I mean? Don't be shy. Bring your product in. Let us sample it. Let's talk through where you're at in your process and what we need to do to get you there, whether it's trying to find you a commercial kitchen, packaging, UPCs, you name it. We have a lot of resources that we utilize.
Expand your network of people, work with different agencies, consultants, people like the MEDC have been an integral part in just expanding our knowledge base, connect with people, and create those partnerships and relationships and be open to change.
Work with your local food industry helpers. PMBC is amazing. MSU Product Center has been great. Michigan is so supportive of its local food industry. And if you take advantage of those entities that are out there to help you, like Pure Michigan Business, it's amazing what they'll do for you. You just have to be active and, you know, make your voice heard and seek out the opportunities, but they will give them to you for sure.
Hi, my name is Javier Evelyn, and I'm the founder and CEO of Allergy. We build products to improve the overall quality of life of those impacted by food allergies. And today I want to talk about my 3 takeaways from matchmaking. My first takeaway is, don't pull out your pitch deck. This isn't the time for that. You want to keep it quick and simple. This is a time to build a quick relationship, that first impression, to ensure that you can get that next meeting. So the goal should only be next meeting, not tell a life story. My second takeaway is, as the great Russell Wilson says, I know in Lionstown, but the separation is really in the preparation. So prep as best as possible. Ensure that you have a good sense of what you want to get out of that conversation. And don't be shy to what I say, shoot your shot. Make sure you close the deal towards getting that next meeting. That should be your ultimate goal. And my last takeaway is, if you run this race, you can't win it in one leg. You got to have 2 feet in the game. So you can practice in matchmaking sessions like this. The Med Health Summit is a great tool to plug into the med device and biosciences ecosystem of Michigan and beyond. You know, Detroit's a hot city right now, so you'll be wise to take advantage of the social capital that the city has at this point.
My name is Marcus Wright. I'm from Daddy's Dough Cookies, and my 3 takeaways, if you want to start a business, are, my first takeaway is you need to have a plan. So write down a plan, whether it's just anything on a scratch sheet of paper. Just, I plan to, bake cookies. I plan to sell sunglasses. I plan to sell lipstick. Whatever it is, make sure you write down a plan. Just start with something on paper. It's easier to build from something than to build from nothing. My second takeaway is to get a business coach. Now, this is not really, really hard. Some people think it's, how do I find a business coach? Well, there are often people who are in your industry. There are plenty of organizations in your area. Some of them are nonprofit organizations that offer free coaching. Some of it are coaches that you actually have to pay for, but it's usually worth your money. I pay for a business coach and I meet with my coach probably every other month. My third takeaway is to not be afraid. I think the biggest thing is that people are often afraid, thinking about, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do this. But think about what would happen if it actually worked. So that was my thing when I started my business. Is this gonna actually work? And I wouldn't know if I didn't try. So I was like, let me try it. I'd rather try it and fail than just wonder for the rest of my life, what would have happened if I tried this? So those are my 3 takeaways.
I want to thank all of our moderators and panelists for those candid and lively discussions. I was able to pop into a few of them and heard some great policy recommendations that will help local businesses restart and grow. I now would like to introduce someone who is a champion for small businesses of all industries and areas, and the Michiganders who own them and work at them. He is a leader in this administration's efforts to get Michiganders back to work, our great Lieutenant Governor, Garlin Gilchrist II, who will have a closing conversation with the incoming new president and CEO of the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, Quentin Messer Jr.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Wow, what a week I've had. First week on the job, I get to sit down with Lieutenant Governor Garlin Gilchrist. I'm here. I'm honored to be a part of today's Small Business Summit. I'm not going to dilly-dally. I just want to let folks know that one of the reasons I'm so honored to be here in Michigan is that throughout the interview process, the hiring process, one of the topics that the executive committee kept focusing upon was the importance of small business. And we all know that small business is the backbone of any economy, any thriving economy. And we really want to celebrate those risk takers who are focused on making sure that there's payroll. And one of the things, and Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist knows this because he's dedicated his career to solving problems, is that no business is a small business to that businessman or that businesswoman. Right. So we're going to talk about that. Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist is an engineer by training. He uses thoughtful innovation, progressive reform, and efficient monetization of policies and programs to make the work better for hardworking Michiganders. From spearheading campaigns for equality and justice to harnessing technology to solve real problems, his focus has consistently remained on serving the public and getting things done. As part of the Whitmer administration, Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist has sought to address injustice and inequity across our state at every level with an approach to addressing disparities deeply rooted in fact-based practices, science, and connecting with individuals across Michigan. Wow, it's an honor, it's a pleasure for me. Welcome, Lieutenant Governor, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Quentin. It's really good to see you. Welcome here to Michigan, and thank you for everyone for participating in this summit. What you said is absolutely right. The term small business to an entrepreneur is kind of a misnomer. As a recovering entrepreneur myself, I know how big of a deal it is to step out there, to put your idea into the world, to have people that you have brought onto your team to be responsible for their success as well. And so I commend and appreciate the people who do that in our communities all across Michigan.
Well, Lieutenant Governor, let's deviate from the script a little bit. You talked about being a recovering entrepreneur. So tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, so for folks who don't know, I'm a software developer by training. That's kind of engineering that I sought after finishing the University of Michigan. Go Blue, always. And so I actually started my first software business about 6 months after I came out of college. I started a job and internship site called Detroit Intern. That was literally because I was guilty about leaving Michigan after graduating from Michigan to go to the West Coast. And that business ultimately grew and was successful over the next several years and was actually acquired by the Kellogg Foundation about 5 years later. And then a good friend of mine from undergrad, we started a Twitter-based donation platform called Tiny Give. That was about how people use social media to connect with causes they cared about. And that business was acquired by a company in California about 3 years after we launched it. So I had a modicum of success, but importantly, I had a lot of turmoil. It's hard work to make an enterprise function. All the nights that you don't sleep because you're worried about how this is going to be successful, putting yourself out there, if people are going to think this is compelling. And so in the pandemic over the last years, business owners had to deal with even more and deal with even more challenges that were beyond their control. And so I just recognize, I empathize, and that is why it's so important to me and the Governor Whitmer that the state of Michigan, that we make it clear that we're going to be there for people who step up like that and to build these kind of enterprises and make them real in Michigan.
So let's talk a little bit. Let's drill down a little bit. One of the things that's a hallmark of this administration and your personal leadership is empathy. So you alluded to sort of the turmoil, the challenges of being an entrepreneur. Talk a little bit more about that and how does that inform the policy framework and the policy decisions that you make now?
Well, I mean, as I said, building a business is not trivial. It's not trivial. It's not easy. It takes courage. It takes fortitude. It takes luck, and it takes investment. And so, when I think about my own experience of those who I know who've gone down this road, the fear of it not going right, the fear of failure, can this all blow up tomorrow? That's real. And that's before you take into account any kind of externalities like a global pandemic or an economic slowdown. And so I think what it causes me to think about is what is the role that I can play, as a state leader, as a policymaker, to create the conditions so that people in every part of our state have a chance for their idea to be successful. So they have an opportunity for this to work. Now, it may or may not. There are other forces that may dictate that. But we need to give everybody a shot. And we need to recognize that different people in different points of their lives, at different points of their careers, who come from different places, that they have different needs. And so our policy framework, our regulatory framework, our capital environment needs to be responsive enough and flexible enough to meet people where they are so they have a chance to be their best self.
So, I am coming to Michigan from Louisiana. So I've been on the other side of the table competing. And as I said to folks, I'm pulling a little bit of a Kevin Durant. When Kevin Durant couldn't get through Golden State or OKC, what he went ahead and did. So
the super team.
Right. So I'm doing the super team here in Michigan. And for my good fortune, But let's talk about, those conversations that those entrepreneurial men and women are having on dinner tables across this great state. How do small businesses in the state figure into the overall economic outlook for Michigan from your perspective?
Yeah, I think it's really critical. Frankly, there is no economy without our people. That's why we focused on public health so much during the pandemic, but it's also why we focused on the people who both start and manage and work in these businesses across our state. And so one, we want to make sure that all of our decision-making tables are first and foremost inclusive of the perspectives of people who are operating and working these enterprises at different levels across different industries so that we can have insight and perspective as we have to make choices. I also want to, point out, or at least highlight, the fact that the entrepreneurs that I've spoken with, and I've been in close conversation with folks during these entire last 15, 16 months with the pandemic, in addition to talking about, how do we get to tomorrow, what may we be struggling with, what do we need from the state, people have also just been still thinking about ideas, have still been thinking about what's the thing they want to make happen next. And I found that really inspiring and motivating. I think about, I went to I visited a hair salon in Old Town in Saginaw a couple of weekends ago. And the woman who operated this salon, she talked about how she had to change up her infrastructure in the salon to be able to accommodate social distancing and things like that. But even in the midst of the pandemic, she had an idea for starting salon suites in Saginaw and encouraged her landlord, who also owned the building across the street, to lease her space so that she could create salon suites that aspiring stylists could rent to build their own practices. This woman thought of a new business and launched it during the pandemic. That's the kind of creativity and innovation and ingenuity and hustle that I see all across Michigan. And so that encourages me as a policymaker, what do I need to do to make women like her know that Michigan is the place where she needs to continue to launch her ideas? And so there's gonna be a lot of type of things and tools we can use to make that true.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue. So, one of the things I want to talk to you about is the fact that the resiliency, the creativity of Michigan entrepreneurs amid the tragedy, the turmoil of the pandemic. And the story of what you saw in Saginaw is something that you see statewide, whether it's in the UP or the lower part of the state. As you think about that, and as you sort of think about this unique opportunity with, as we come out of this, and we will come out of it and come out of better, what are the three things you say to entrepreneurs to kind of keep them encouraged? Because what I hear you say is some of this is you got to have the hard work, but some of it is just mentally, the perspective, maintaining that perspective. Mm-hmm. So talk about some of the things that you do to sort of encourage people who may be feeling, gosh, I don't know whether I can keep carrying this on me.
Yeah. So, I think the presence is very important. And so one of the reasons why I spend so much time on the road in Michigan. Michigan's a big state. I spend so much time on the road in Michigan, meeting people where they are. Because I do feel like, the pandemic has exacerbated our need for partnership and connection and relationship. And so being there, being present, say that I hear you, I'm here with you, that your success is the state of Michigan's success, and in turn, my success. So I want to make sure that I understand every tool that I can, deploy so that you have a better chance of being successful. And knowing that that's something that's a priority for me, otherwise I wouldn't be showing up. So that's one thing, that partnership from your state will be there for you in a way that we want to make more clear and more felt than any other state in the country. I think the second thing is that, I spent part of my career as a community organizer. And one of the principles that I learned there is that you needed to have big ears and a strong vision. And so the strong vision for an inclusive and connected and vibrant economy that is as diverse as our people, that welcomes ideas and enterprises and creates opportunities for everyone in an equitable way, that's something that's very exciting to me. But I need to couple that with big enough ears to recognize if we need to go in a different direction, or if there's something that we haven't considered. And so I ask entrepreneurs to think about that with their own enterprises as well, that we know you have a vision for how you want it to be, But we also recognize that sometimes the business you run might not be like the one you envisioned, but it could be something better. It could be something different. It's a difference between planning and preparation. You plan for one idea, but you're prepared for something greater. So I think about that a lot too. And then the third piece is that in this moment, we have a generational opportunity to create economic pathways to prosperity for people in a way that has not been present for us. That's because coming out of this pandemic, we will have the level of federal resources to invest in our people, to put money into our economy that just hasn't been present before in most of our careers or lifetimes. And we must meet that moment. And so if anyone knows about meeting a moment, about accepting a challenge, about embracing a sense of timing that leads to execution quickly and swiftly, it's entrepreneurs. That's the same posture that we need to be in as a state to meet the moment that we're in. And so I ask people to have that attitude and perspective as we come through this together.
Lieutenant Governor, there's a lot that you said there. I want to unpack some of it. So one of the things you talked about was the rich diversity and making sure that there's an inclusive vision. So talk about the fact that inclusion really is a competitive advantage. And that businesses, small and large, who embrace that and understand that, whether it's on the hiring side or the customer preferences, are going to be successful ones. So talk about, even from your experience with the two successful companies you led, how that lens allowed you to have success.
So actually, I'm going to borrow something from you. So one of the reasons why we're so excited to have Quentin here on the team, he used an analogy during one of our first conversations about needing to have all your players on the field. And I'm a basketball player, so I want all my players on the court, not the field. But what that means is we all have a different role to play in our team's success. Basketball team as guards, forwards, centers, coaches, trainers, and fans. Like, everyone has a role to play to make the team successful. And so that diversity means that we recognize the strengths and the things that everyone brings to the table. You know, engineering companies that are successful are made up of people who don't have engineering backgrounds as well as people who do. You know, when we have the diversity, our vibrant immigrant community, our growing immigrant community across our state make meaningful and important and critical contributions to our economy and to our business enterprises. And we need to make sure that they are empowered and have pathways to be able to be not only customers or consumers, but partners and participants and investors at every level of our economy, and making sure that that is possible. There's a pathway for that. And so I want everyone in Michigan to see themselves in the present and the future of our economy, and then see a pathway for how they can participate at whatever level makes sense to them and for them, and that is accessible to them and truly available to them. You know, one of the things, when I graduated from college at U of M, I wanted to be a software developer, and I thought that I needed to move somewhere else to be the software developer. I didn't think that I had a path for that. That's not true. I don't know if it was true then. That was my perception. But we can make that reality and perception no longer be felt here in Michigan. And that means that we need to have enough doorways, enough pathways that are open to everyone to participate in. Because I don't actually think that anyone wants the economy of Michigan to fail, or to be smaller, or to not have a place where they can grow. And so we need to just demonstrate that we're committed to that.
You know, you said something, a couple of things that are incredibly powerful there. Part of it is that notion of visibility. You know, being able to see yourself in the economy. One of the things I know my colleagues at MEDC, folks in the administration, folks in the state legislature, you know, they're partners throughout Michigan at the regional, local economic development level, in the critical small businesses, because every business started as a small business, right? And so it's critically important for people to see that notion, see themselves, that feeling of economic visibility. But talk about the big ears, strong vision. And if you could sort of use, maybe if you want to, the basketball analogy. You know, a successful team, you got to listen. There's a lot of communication out on the court. Talk about that and tie that into how we in Michigan are trying to get entrepreneurs tied into an ecosystem so that they can either access capital, access mentoring, access resources of government to know about procurement opportunities and other things. So talk about the necessity for the big ears and strong vision for entrepreneurs?
Well, I think it goes back to just the fact that all of us have to be on the same team. And that doesn't mean that there's not healthy competition. You know, go back to basketball, everybody's competing in practice. You want playing time, right? But we are on the same team in terms that we all want the state of Michigan to be a place where people can prosper. And so that vision for the governor and I is one where, again, participation is possible for every person. And that if you are inclined to be an entrepreneur, there's a pathway for you to do so. If you may not be an entrepreneur, but you may be a great first employee to an entrepreneur, I want you to be that too. Or if you might be the person who can come in and scale a business that's ready to go to the next level, you can help do that too. And so I think this is about enabling people to find their role. But you can't do that if you don't understand where people are. So that's where the big ears comes in. Again, listening, understanding, empathizing, recognizing what people need, and then being able to then design solutions, whether those are executive solutions or policy changes that come from us, whether that's working in partnership with the legislature, because our legislative partners, they want investment and need investment in their communities as well, because it all adds up to success for our state. And so recognizing that we are on the same team, and perhaps in this area, like no other, economic investment in Michigan is good for Michigan. And doing so in a way that ensures returns for our communities, whether that is in the returns that it leads to from an educational perspective and opportunity, exposing young people to these different type of opportunities and roles to play. I was a big beneficiary of exposure to the profession of engineering as a child through the Detroit Area Pre-College Engineering Program. And so how do we make sure that our industries are also sort of reaching forward, not reaching back, but reaching forward and exposing young Michiganders to what can be possible for them? Because if someone would have perhaps done that for me in the software development space, maybe I wouldn't have thought that I needed to go somewhere else to be the professional I wanted to be. And so this is the opportunity for us when we're all playing on the same team.
Now that's incredibly powerful. So talk about playing on the same team. You talked about competition. Shout out to the Pistons.
Yeah.
#1 draft pick, so let's not sleep on that. Good times are coming back to the Motor City.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, you talked about healthy competition. Talk about how successful teams from your athletic and your entrepreneurial career have sort of gotten over those moments of conflict, those moments, those challenging moments. You're right, everybody wants minutes. And you're grinding, you're doing what you're supposed to do in practice, and maybe your number isn't called in that particular game, and you feel that's not fair or whatever.
Yeah.
Talk about how successful conflict resolution, and talk about, and if you can, tie it into the notion, context of small businesses, so that people can kind of get over those inevitable humps that do happen as they're growing their business. Talk about strategies that you've used in order to get there.
Well, we have to recognize that, ultimately, the biggest success is never singular. And so if you look at areas of the country that have been able to coalesce around the notion of economic growth, it's because you have a lot of successful business enterprises that have come there or have launched there or have sustained there, not just one. There are people who will be at the front end of that, but ultimately it's communities of success that will scale best. And so, from a small business perspective, I want to get everyone to see that all of our businesses can be successful. They can be. Now, that might require a pivot here and there, which my businesses certainly did. It might require a partnership that perhaps wasn't considered. It might require a reimagination of certain aspects. But ultimately, there's a version of success that we can find if we work together. And that our success is not going to come alone. And frankly, it's not going to get to the scale that I think we all want. And so we don't want just one part of the state of Michigan to be economically successful. That is by definition not success for our state. We want that success to be present and possible in every region, present and possible in every community, present and possible in both peninsulas, and leveraging all of the resources and talent that we've been blessed with as a state. And so, teams come together in the face of adversity to overcome it. Teams don't disperse. If you're dispersing, then what's the point of having a team? So we have to come together and recognize that it's in all of our interests for all of us to have a better chance of success.
Well, I know that you're running craze, so I want to be sensitive to your time, but one final question, and then I'm going to ask you to sort of impart some closing words, is that as we emerge from this pandemic, and we've had a great summit today, and you've certainly sort of provided some inspiring words and provided a sense and given people a sense of the vision of the administration. What do you see as sort of next? If you sort of said to that man, that woman that's listening, wherever they are in the state of Michigan, what's next for them? What do you sort of say, hey, maybe you should think about this or think about that as you think about it? And then after that, I'll turn it over for any closing comments that you might say.
You know, so the phrase that comes to mind for me is that I don't just want you to be successful. Like, I need you to be successful. I need you to put in that work and effort. And I also need you to be confident and know that I'm going to be there with you. That the work, I will put in the work at this level so that you aren't able to put in the work at your level, so that we can be successful together. What that requires is me to listen to you and you to talk to me. So we have to be communicating. And that is why summits like this Small Business Summit are so important. That's why we have the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, to be that point of connection, that source of resources, that connector for collaboration, that information point. This exists literally to support you in your success because the state needs it. As we emerge from this pandemic, I want Michigan to be the place where that leads the nation in businesses starting after the pandemic. And we can do that. We have enough people with enough ideas and enough ambition, and we have enough resources to make that true in Michigan. We may need to better optimize and organize it, but it's here. We have the raw materials, the same raw materials that led us to invent assembly lines, that led us to build the Mackinac Bridge, that led all that innovation there. Like, we have those materials within us as Michiganders. And so that is what we must deploy. And so what's next is for you to push your idea into the world, and then for us to meet you and help create the conditions for that idea to have a chance of success.
Lieutenant Governor, I couldn't have said it better. I can tell you, I've got some tremendous colleagues. I would be remiss if I didn't thank my colleagues at MEDC for a tremendous summit and all the partners throughout the state of Michigan. Lieutenant Governor, what inspiring words, and thank you to your team. Thank you for making the time. Bottom line, the Pistons getting the #1 draft pick is symbolic that it is winning time in the state of Michigan, and we're all going to be a part of it. Let's get it. Thank you so much.
Well, the Lieutenant Governor has left us with some wise counsel about listening and working together to keep moving Michigan forward. I want to thank everyone who joined and participated in this seminar today. Today's discussions were a showcase on how bringing state and local leaders, economic development officials, business owners, lenders, and community organizations together to collaborate can help us find solutions to the challenges facing Michigan's Main Street businesses and how the state can best support them. I'm pleased to share that we will soon be announcing a series of regional in-person events later this summer where we can continue this important conversation. Thanks again, and have a great day.